Chapter 86. After inquiring about the great hunt from Caretakershire, Renbotchian had a rough idea of what to do. The autumn hunt was originally a custom of the Aboriginals. Now that the city was built, many commoners did not have such conditions. However, it was still held once a year. Those who participated were the sons and daughters of the court officials. They were able to show off their strength in front of the Empress. The Empress could also observe whether there were outstanding youths from various families through the autumn hunt. At the same time, the Empress would always invite the envoys from various countries to participate in the autumn hunt to let them see the strength of the Aboriginals' youths. After that, the news would naturally spread back to the various countries. This had already become a routine. After the Empress came to power, in addition to inviting the envoys from various countries, she would also invite the youths from various countries who came to send gifts to participate. This was also a form of deterrence and display of strength because many of these youths would be in power in the future. It gave them a direct impression of the valiant strength of the Aboriginals and also spread the news through their mouths. The hunting location was a forest that was half a day's journey away from Lawn City. There were many wild beasts there, and many of them were even more ferocious. This was a stage for everyone to display their abilities. Almost every year, the person with the best results would receive more attention and a better path to promotion. At the same time, their performance during the hunt would also attract the attention of many young ladies. As a result, everyone who participated in the hunt was full of energy. However, Renbotchian's mind was filled with bad thoughts. According to Caretakershire, hunting on the mountain wasn't for hunting rabbits. Instead, it was for the individual. If he went, he would not know how to use knives, spears, rods, bows and arrows. Not to mention hunting, it would be good if he did not get beaten up by the prey. Those young masters had servants, but he didn't. Furthermore, it was a rabbit. If it was a rabbit with a mouth full of fangs like those in the Beast Park, Renbotchian felt that he would not be able to defeat it. Wasn't it making things difficult for him to hunt with those humanoid Gundams who demolished houses with their bare hands? The matter of the beast wasn't what Renbotchian was most worried about. Instead, he was most worried about the humans. These days, he had offended many people in the Honglu Bureau. Initially, he thought that they couldn't do anything to him. He didn't expect such a thing to happen. If someone were to plot against him on the mountain, he would probably have to pay for his 50 kilograms of meat before he even encountered the beast. This was simply a scam. After thinking about it, Renbotchian cursed, "Damn it. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have been so ruthless." Now, there were more than one or two people who wanted to chew his bones and swallow them. Since they had already come this far, there was no point in thinking too much. Unless, when the time came, he would hug the Empress's thigh and become her pendant. He would rather die than go up the mountain, even though he really wanted to do that. Needless to say, he had to go back and get a gun. Even if he brought 2 guns for self-defense, he might not be safe. But without a gun to defend himself, he was definitely not safe. Not only could a gun be used to deal with ferocious beasts, but it could also be used to deal with people. Calculating the time, he had to return to Earth tomorrow night. It seemed that he had to settle the matter of notifying the young masters of the other 3 nations and submit the name list. If someone else came after he left, he would let someone else handle it. The Empress would definitely understand. One day after the great hunt, he would return to Earth. When he returned, it would be just in time to attend the Empress's birthday celebration. Early the next morning, Renbotchian arrived at the Honglu Bureau to arrange for someone to inform them about the great hunt. Not long after he sat down, someone came to report that someone of high status had arrived. It was the 7th Prince of Great Xia. Currently, Great Xia was the most powerful nation that Renbotchian knew of. Whether in terms of land area or population, its land area was 3 times that of Dayo's. Its population was even more. It had more than 200 million people, which was close to 3 times the population. In a feudal world, this was already rather terrifying. With a large population, there were also many experts. It was said that 6 of the top 10 experts in the world were in Great Xia. Furthermore, Great Xia had a long history of culture. Every nation was deeply influenced by Great Xia. Especially the Yun nation and the Qin nation, which were originally of the same origin as Great Xia, they were even more affected. In various senses, Great Xia was currently the hegemon of this world that Rinpoche knew of. With the arrival of the 7th prince of such a nation, Rinpoche really couldn't neglect him. He hurriedly brought Xiongpai out. There was a large group of people and horses outside the door. Hundreds of armored and murderous knights were standing in front of the Honglu temple. Behind these knights was a large luxurious carriage. 6 extremely tall horses were pulling the carriage. They were half a head taller than the other horses. Their entire bodies were covered with satin-like fur and looked extremely spirited. Just by looking at these 6 horses, one could tell that they were definitely priceless. If any of them were to be placed in the hands of others, they would probably be treated as treasures. However, at this moment, they were being used to pull the carriage. Inevitably, one couldn't help but feel that it was a waste of God's gifts. Rinpoche stood in front of the Honglu temple and didn't continue to walk forward. The other party was the 7th prince of Great Xia, but he was an official of Dayo. Coming out to welcome him was already sufficient etiquette. In fact, other than the people who came out to take a look at the beginning, the people who arrived later on were directly brought into the Honglu temple. As such, Rinpoche felt that standing in front of the door to welcome him was already sufficient. There was no need to eagerly run to the front to welcome him. After all, he wouldn't be paid by Dayo. However, what made him feel strange was that these knights looked at him strangely. Although it seemed that their strict discipline allowed them to control themselves, the shocked expressions on their faces couldn't be concealed at all. Why are they looking at me? Because I'm handsome. I'm not that handsome to such a tragic extent, right? Rinpoche touched his face. He couldn't figure out what was going on with those people's gazes. He could only pretend that he didn't see them and continued to wait at the door. After standing in front of the door for 2 minutes, Rinpoche was getting more and more impatient. Just as he was considering whether to turn around and go back, a man on a horse ran to the front and gave the order. Soon after, hundreds of knights started to move forward slowly. The carriage got closer and closer to Rinpoche until it stopped in front of the door. Just now, from afar, he already felt that this carriage looked extremely luxurious. When it was right in front of him and he saw the gold-inlaid patterns and inlaid gems, Rinpoche really wanted to find a camera and take a picture of this carriage. What was a luxurious carriage? This was it. The body of the carriage was built with an unknown purple wood. Mountains, rivers, and clouds were first carved on it. Then, a pattern of flying cranes was inlaid with gold. It was vivid and lifelike. The eyes and crown of the cranes were inlaid with gems. As the light flowed, they were filled with spirituality. It was as if they could fly out from the walls of the carriage in the next second. This carriage looked more like an exquisite piece of art than a means of transportation. As the carriage stopped, a pair of hands reached out from inside the carriage. The curtains were pulled open, and the first person to come out was a stunning lady dressed in pink. Following her was a young man dressed in a white robe and a white jade crown on his head. When Rinpoche saw this young man's face, he was stunned. It was as if he was looking at himself in the mirror. His facial features were exactly the same. It was as if they were carved from the same mold. Rinpoche had never thought that there would actually be such a person in the world who looked exactly like him. Moreover, he was the 7th prince of Great Xia. Chapter 87. Rinpoche didn't know why he had such an impulse, but this feeling came from the bottom of his heart. It was as if it was the deepest desire and impulse in his heart. If he killed this person who looked exactly like him, then he would be the only one left. Renbochin didn't know if the other party had the same thoughts as him. He suppressed the killing intent in his heart, cupped his fists, and asked, "Are you the seventh prince of Great Xia?" Renbochin didn't dare to reveal even the slightest bit of killing intent in his heart. It was too easy for such a person to kill him. "That's me." The seventh prince suppressed the killing intent in his heart and showed an appropriate expression of surprise before nodding slowly. At this moment, the two of them had a murderous intent towards each other, but they concealed it very well. The only difference was that this was the second time the seventh prince had seen Renbochin. Seventh prince walked in front of Renbochin and faced him. Everyone in the surroundings looked at the two of them in a daze. Who would have thought that there would be two people so similar in this world? More than one person suspected that the seventh prince had a twin brother. However, after thinking about it, he felt that it was unlikely that such a thing would happen. "I really feel that I'm looking at myself," the seventh prince exclaimed softly after sizing up Renbochin. "This world is really mysterious. Xiao Wu, don't you agree?" The seventh prince's words were directed at the beautiful woman. The woman came to the seventh prince's side and looked at the two of them. She gently covered her mouth and appropriately revealed a shocked expression. Renbochin pursed his lips and didn't say anything. He also felt that it was very mystical that there was actually someone different from him in another world. "In the future, you and I should get to know each other better." The seventh prince patted Renbochin's shoulder and seemed to be very happy. However, Renbochin didn't believe this nonsense. One would be a fool to believe him. If he was the seventh prince and saw someone who looked exactly like him, he would only have two thoughts. One was to kill him, and the other was to keep him by his side as a substitute so that he could use him as a shield at a critical moment. He was now an official of Dayo. Not to mention his position as the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall, he was still a secondary class, rank 6 Honglu deputy. The second option was very difficult to achieve, so there was only one option left, and that was to kill him. This was what Renbochin understood at this moment. Back then, he was able to have such an impulse in his heart, so how could a person of his status tolerate someone who looked exactly like him living in the outside world? Very soon, Renbochin laughed and said, "I didn't expect that I would actually look like the Prince of Great Xia. This world is really magical. Perhaps in some corner of this world, there are people who look exactly the same." The seventh prince narrowed his eyes slightly. If someone else had said this in the past, he wouldn't have believed it. But now, he believed it. "Your Highness, please follow me." Although His Highness should be addressed as such, right? Although Your Highness has a distinguished status, there are still some procedures that must be followed, Renbochin said as he walked in. When everyone went in, the people outside were still in disbelief. Qi Heng and Qi Xing also smacked their lips in surprise. They didn't expect such a coincidence to happen. He could brag about this when he got back. The seventh prince's subordinates were even more surprised than the two of them. Following the seventh prince, the woman called Xiao Wu and a person who looked like the commander of the cavalry followed. On the way into the courtyard, the seventh prince was still marveling at the wonders of this world. He casually asked, "Where is Deputy Ren's ancestral home? Maybe it's also Great Xia, or maybe it's a descendant of the royal family. Otherwise, it's really hard for me to imagine that there's anyone in this world who doesn't have any blood relations with me." When Renbochin heard this, he thought to himself that if he wasn't from Earth, he might really believe it. "But," he said, "I'm not worthy to be associated with you. My ancestors were commoners in the marketplace and didn't even have an official." The seventh prince turned his head to look at Renbochin and then turned his head away as if nothing had happened. Xiao Wu, who was beside him, frowned. Just now, the seventh prince grabbed her hand very forcefully and it hurt her a little. But, very quickly, she intimately held on to the seventh prince's hand and transmitted the warmth of her palm to him. Looking at Xiao Wu bending over the table and filling out a piece of paper, Rinpoche recalled the Empress's instructions and said, "The annual Great Hunt will be held in a few days. I wonder if the seventh prince is interested. I really want to see the young generation of Dayo." The seventh prince laughed. "But before that, I would like to request Deputy to pass on the message that I would like to meet the Empress of your country." Rinpoche nodded his head. "I will report to Her Majesty. I don't know if Her Majesty will meet me. In addition, there will be someone to inform Your Highness about the time and location of the Great Hunt." The seventh prince nodded his head. "Deputy Ren, if you have time, I would like to have a drink with you. I hope you won't decline." Rinpoche laughed. "Recently, I've been rather busy and I can't leave. If there's a chance in the future, I will definitely pay you a visit." Seeing that Rinpoche rejected him, the seventh prince didn't say anything else. After Xiao Wu finished filling out the paper, he brought his men and left. Rinpoche didn't send him off. After the seventh prince left, he sat down on the chair and panted heavily. Just now, he simply couldn't suppress the murderous intent in his heart. He even had the urge to let Xiong Pai pinch him to death. However, he didn't dare to do so. He didn't know if Xiong Pai would die, but he knew that he was definitely going to die. Furthermore, he wouldn't believe that the Prince of Great Xia didn't have a few experts by his side. At this moment, Xiong Pai had a blank look on his face. "Deputy, he looks so much like you. If we were outside, I definitely wouldn't be able to recognize you." Rinpoche ignored him. Not to mention Xiong Pai, even he himself wouldn't be able to recognize him. After the seventh prince left, the boiling murderous intent in his heart finally calmed down. Even he himself felt strange as to why he would have such a reaction when he saw the seventh prince. Before he came to this world, he didn't even kill a chicken. Although he had let Xiong Pai kill a few people these days, it was all for the purpose of intimidating others. He didn't feel comfortable in his heart. And this was the first time he had such a murderous intent toward a stranger. After sitting behind the table in a daze for a while, Rinpoche suddenly thought of a movie that he had watched before. There were countless versions of himself in countless parallel worlds, and every version of himself had different encounters. He always felt that this seventh prince was a different version of himself in a different world. Under some kind of coincidence, he came to this world and met the version of himself in this world. Although this idea wasn't reliable, he felt that it wasn't impossible. Otherwise, he couldn't explain the murderous intent in his heart just now. In the movie, every time he killed himself, he would become stronger. According to Rinpoche's understanding, the same origin would be divided into countless parts. After killing the version of himself in another world, he would obtain the origin of the other party and become stronger. Of course, this was just a delusion in the movie world. Chapter 88. What would happen if the seventh prince really died? Was there such a thing as an origin in this world? Would he absorb his origin? Was he really the Rinpoche from another world? When these thoughts appeared in Rinpoche's mind, it was as if he was holding a Pandora's box in his hand, constantly tempting him. However, he didn't dare to do so. Even those who were trampled or hanged to death by his order were the trusted aides or stewards of those young masters. Although he appeared to be ruthless, he knew what he could do and what he couldn't. With the identity of the seventh prince, he really didn't dare to do so. If he died here, it would be like a president of a big country dying in China. The impact would be too great. It would be like slapping the face of the great Xia imperial family and spitting on them. The other party didn't need any evidence. As long as there was a little doubt, they could send someone to kill him. Not to mention whether the Empress would protect him, even if she wanted to, unless he never left the palace, the other party could just send an expert. Rinpoche rubbed his forehead and suppressed this thought. He had to settle the matter that the Empress had instructed him to do. It was better to keep the matter of the seventh prince at the bottom of his heart. However, Rinpoche raised his vigilance. If he had such an impulse, what about the other party? Would he be the same as him? If the other party had such thoughts, given his identity, he wouldn't have to worry about this and that. Then, he would be in danger. That afternoon, all the people who had arrived to participate in the Great Hunt had been counted. Everyone was going to participate. Unlike Renbachien, the others already knew about the Great Hunt. They had rushed to Lawn City before the Great Hunt and naturally had the intention to participate. In any case, each of them could bring an attendant. After all, the people from other countries weren't as skilled as the Aboriginals. Even if those heirs were skilled in martial arts, they still needed a helper who could help them carry their prey. This was the difference between them and Renbachien. Although Renbachien wasn't an Aboriginal, he didn't have such preferential treatment. While counting the number of people, Renbachien put aside his thoughts and went to look for Gu Daxiong. After all, he needed a mount to go hunting. Not to mention riding a horse, Renbachien hadn't even touched one before. Even if it was a last-minute effort, he had to think of a way. Gu Daxiong was snoring in his room when he was woken up by Renbachien. He scolded Renbachien discontentedly. After hearing the purpose of Renbachien's visit, he laughed and said, "You can take away the ones you like in the backyard." "Thank you very much, Sir Gu." Renbachien cupped his hands in thanks and went straight to the backyard. Generally speaking, people in ancient times would refer to a cow pen or a horse pen. However, Gu Daxiong only referred to a pen. After Renbachien went over and took a look, he understood why. The only thing missing was a horse. Speaking of which, there were relatively few horses in Dayo. Most of them were cattle and sheep. It was the same in this enclosure. There were a few sheep, the kind that pulled carts on the streets. They were huge and about the same size as horses. There were also a few cows that looked more docile, and they had curved and spiral horns. It was unknown what the difference was. The spiral-horned cows were greenish in color, and their bodies were thinner. In addition, there were two giant birds not far away. Their feathers were yellowish-brown. They looked a little like ostriches, but their heads were much bigger than ostriches. Their beaks were wider, and their necks were thicker. There was a faint stench on their bodies. Even though it wasn't very strong, it was very disgusting. Renbachien couldn't help but cover his nose. "Are these things used to be ridden?" Renbachien curiously asked the person in charge. "Sir, these are mountain-gazing birds. They run extremely fast, especially when crossing mountains and rivers. They are much faster than other animals. They are usually used to deliver letters," the person in charge of these animals immediately said. Renbachien curiously looked at the two mountain-gazing birds a few more times before asking, "What kind of mount is better for me to ride when I go hunting?" "It must be docile and easy to control. The first is the mountain-gazing bird. It can be ridden on mountains and can jump up rocks that aren't tall. The second is the crooked cow. It's fast and can carry things, but it's not as convenient as the mountain-gazing bird," the person in charge said. Renbachien followed the direction of his finger and looked at the two crooked cows with spiral-shaped horns. Then, he looked at the mountain birds. He preferred crooked cows as their backs were wider, making them more comfortable to ride on. Furthermore, they could carry things. Although the mountain-gazing bird could run and jump in the mountains, according to Caretaker Sure, there were many ferocious beasts in the mountains. If they were to encounter ferocious beasts while riding on this bird, they might not be able to react in time. It would be safer for him to walk slowly on his own two legs. It wasn't that the crooked cow couldn't climb the mountain, but it wasn't as easy as the mountain-gazing bird. The main problem was the mountain-gazing bird's stench. If he kept riding it, it would be a torture. "Bring this crooked cow out for me to try," Renbachien said. "All right." The person in charge opened the wooden fence and pulled out a crooked cow. Then, he took a saddle from the side and put it on. After that, he held the rope and said to Renbachien, "Sir, please." The crooked cow's back was about 1. 3 meters above the ground. Renbochin took a deep breath, grabbed the saddle, and climbed up. This crooked cow was rather well behaved and didn't move at all when Renbochin was crawling on the net. After Renbochin was seated properly, the person in charge passed the rope to him and told him how to operate it. Go! Renbochin's calf knocked on the cow's stomach, and the cow immediately moved forward. The reins were attached to the cow's face, and it was similar to a horse's. The way to control it was similar as well. In addition, the crooked cow was docile, so it was easy to control. However, once the crooked cow started to run, Renbochin had to protect its body for fear that it would fall. Not long after, Renbochin started to feel uncomfortable all over his body. The speed of this crooked cow wasn't considered slow, but it was too bumpy. Furthermore, it was swaying left and right, making Renbochin feel motion sickness. Renbochin hurriedly stopped the crooked cow and jumped onto the ground to rest. Is this the most stable one? Renbochin asked. The mountain-gazing bird is more stable than the crooked cow. Sir, you can give it a try. Seeing this, Renbochin had no choice but to let the person in charge bring out the mountain-gazing bird. The mountain-gazing bird was also very docile, or it could be said that it had been tamed. Renbochin stroked its feathers first. The mountain-gazing bird let out a gee sound and turned its head to look at Renbochin. Sir, you can stroke its head first. It likes to do that, the person in charge said. Renbochin placed his hand on the mountain-gazing bird's head and it let out a gee sound again. At the same time, its eyes squinted slightly. It looked very comfortable, no different from a cat or dog that was begging to be stroked. After he climbed onto the back of the mountain-gazing bird and ran for a while, he realized that even though this thing didn't look very eye-catching, it was indeed much more comfortable than riding the crooked cow. The feathers on its body were also softer, and it didn't chafe the inner thighs. The only drawback was the faint stench that kept drilling into his nose. Are all these things so smelly? Renbochin asked. Yes, this thing relies on its stench to make other wild beasts not like to treat it as prey, the person in charge said. Renbochin furrowed his eyebrows for a long time. Alright, this thing was a little smelly, but it was indeed comfortable to ride. If he were to ride the crooked cow, he reckoned that he would collapse before he even reached his destination. If it was a little smelly, so be it. He would bear with it. At most, he would bring 2 bottles of perfume and spray it on when he returned from Earth. Chapter 89. Renbochin opened his eyes, looked at the familiar roof, and stared blankly for a long time. In the novels, one would never come back after transmigrating, or one could wear whatever they wanted. Going through this torment every few days really gave him a headache. He was lucky this time that the Empress's birthday celebration and the Great Hunt happened to coincide with his time in that world. However, he couldn't be so lucky every time. It would be troublesome if he happened to return to Earth for some important matter. He really wished that he could control his transmigration back and forth. That would be much safer. After thinking about it, Renbochin felt that he should install a camera. Since he couldn't find the reason for his transmigration from his body, he would record it to see how he transmigrated. Perhaps he could find some clues. He sat up from his bed and opened the window. It was even colder outside, and a gust of cold air hit him in the face. There was some snow outside the windowsill. It seemed that it had just snowed, probably last night. It was already November. It had been more than 4 months since he arrived in that world. However, only 2 months had passed in Renbochin's body, and this was when the time on Earth and in the other world were added together. Renbochin felt that if this continued, his lifespan would follow his body's time. Others had lived for 10 years, but his body had only lived for 5 years. However, in that world, others had lived for 4 years, but his body had lived for 6 years. In a short period of time, there wasn't much of a difference, but as time passed, it would gradually become apparent. He wandered between two worlds, but he was different from the people in both worlds. This was the biggest problem with time not synchronizing. However, this was only a guess. It would probably take a long time for him to verify whether this guess was true or not. Now, it was time to prepare the things that he needed. This great hunt was a huge trap for him. If he didn't handle it well, he might not have a future. If the seventh prince had the same thoughts when he saw Renbochin, he wouldn't have as many misgivings as Renbochin. There were also those sons of nobles who couldn't wait to eat him alive. In addition, there were all kinds of ferocious beasts in the mountain range. Renbochin felt that to others, this was just a stage for them to showcase themselves, have fun, or observe others. To him, however, it was a huge trap where he could lose his life at any time. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility that he was being overly sensitive. If there were aboriginals around, no one would dare to make a move on him. However, he didn't know much about the Great Hunt. It was better for him to be fully prepared. It would be best if he could get closer to some of the aboriginals in the future. This way, he would be safer. However, the Empress wouldn't be able to keep her promise to not embarrass herself. However, Renbochin felt that his life was more important. If he had a choice, he would rather hug the Empress's thigh than go up the mountain. He just didn't know if the Empress would kick him up the mountain. At the very least, she told him not to embarrass himself. She definitely didn't want him to hug her thigh at the foot of the mountain. First, he searched the internet for the things he needed and confirmed what he wanted. First was a crossbow. This thing was perfect for hunting in the mountains. Moreover, it was silent, so it wouldn't attract other people. The crossbow might not be as powerful as some bows and arrows, but even if he was given a composite bow, he still wouldn't be able to hit it. There were still 3 days left, and Renbochin didn't think that he could master archery in such a short period of time. Next was the gun, which was one of the most common killing weapons in modern times. It was also more powerful than a crossbow. Renbochin prepared to get one for self-defense. If possible, Renbochin also wanted to get 2 grenades or something. If he really met with an accident, he could throw these grenades at the other party. Even if they didn't kill him, they could still injure him. At the very least, they could scare him and make it easier for him to escape. These were the main things he needed. There were still some other miscellaneous things. According to what Renbochin knew, they still had to camp for the night. There would always be some small things that could be used. For example, sleeping bags, various seasoning boxes, and a military knife. Renbochin didn't have the means to buy guns and crossbows. Even though there was a phone number for selling guns written on the door of the toilet at the bus terminal, it was written so openly that the police would think that they were blind. Renbochin still felt that it wasn't reliable. If he was lucky, they would sell him a BB gun. If he was unlucky, they would sell him a water gun. These were all tricks. It was better not to find trouble for himself. He was afraid that he would have to look for Ching for these things. In any case, he was a young master. Renbochin believed that he would definitely be able to find someone to get them. Renbochin heated up a bag of milk in the fridge with the microwave and ate his breakfast with biscuits. Then, he picked up his phone and gave Ching a call. "I say, did something happen to you recently? I couldn't find you." Sure enough, men become bad when they get rich. "Are you afraid that I will disturb you?" Hearing Ching's voice, Renbochin laughed. He was intentionally distancing himself from Ching, and Ching must have felt it. He had no choice. He was afraid that Ching would find out about his secret. After all, his disappearance and reappearance were too regular. It would always make people feel that something was wrong. "Is that why you are so bad?" Renbochin laughed. "That was in the past. I have turned over a new leaf now," Ching immediately said. Are you free in the afternoon? Let's have a meal together. Sure, send me the address. Jiang Nan was talking about you yesterday, Chen Qing immediately said. Alright, you go ahead with your work. Ren Baqian hung up the phone and noticed that he had received a few messages. He opened them and saw that one was sent by an unknown number 2 days ago. This is Fei. I am getting my salary from my new job. When are you free? I will treat you to a meal as a form of gratitude. Fei. Ren Baqian's first reaction was that he had sent the message to the wrong person. Then, he suddenly thought of the girl who was wearing a hearing aid but was very confident in finding a job. He closed the message and looked at his WeChat. Dong Haiqing had sent him a message. Young Master Ren, it seems like you don't like your old classmate anymore. A strong sense of resentment and dissatisfaction was transmitted through the screen of the phone. Below her was a message from Qin Bing. I haven't been able to contact you since the gathering. Did something happen? Ren Baqian shook his head. Let them think whatever they want. At that time, he had just entered the other world and was still in the mood to contact his old classmate. However, after such a long time, Ren Baqian always felt that the other world was the main world. He didn't care about many things on Earth anymore. Of course, this was also because Ren Baqian's thoughts were always on how to preserve his life and climb up. After a long time, it seemed that the other world was the important one. On Earth, as long as one had money, one wouldn't starve to death. There was nothing to worry about. Ren Baqian continued to scroll through WeChat. His parents were still posting things like the way to maintain good health, the secret to longevity, and the 10 things that everyone should know. He placed his phone back on the table and surfed the internet for a while. Then, he changed his clothes and drove to the city center to find a store that sold surveillance equipment. He bought a set of equipment and arranged to install it in the afternoon. After that, he found a nearby barber shop that looked well renovated and was ready to get his hair cut. However, when he entered the shop, he saw a girl wearing a red device on her ear. She was washing someone's hair. Can it be such a coincidence? Ren Baqian laughed. He didn't even think of replying to her message. Previously, he had helped her out because he had nothing better to do. He thought that he wouldn't have the chance to meet her again. After all, in a city with a population of millions, the chances of meeting each other were very small. Many people wouldn't even meet each other in their lifetime, let alone in his situation. He didn't expect to meet Fei at a random barber shop. He didn't know if this world was too coincidental or if it was fated. Chapter 90. Fei washed the guest's hair and wrapped a towel around it. When she raised her head, she saw Ren Baqian standing beside her. She was so surprised that she opened her mouth and let out an sound. New job? Ren Baqian smiled and asked. Yes. Fei's lips opened and closed as she spat out a word. She seemed to have a hard time as she preferred to write on a piece of paper. I saw your message. I will send you a message when I'm free, Ren Baqian said. I still have to trouble you for a haircut. Ah. Fei nodded her head immediately. It seemed that it was easier to say the word, ah, than other sounds. Ren Baqian lowered his head and allowed Fei to apply shampoo and scrub his hair. Fei's hands were very soft and she was very attentive when she was washing his hair. After that, Ren Baqian sat on a chair and asked the hairdresser to shave his hair flat. He left a short stubble on his head and it looked like he had just come out of a prison cell. It was probably because it was too hot. The people of Deo did not think that their bodies, hair, and skin were inherited by their parents. Everyone's head was clean and bald was also a common hairstyle. For example, Xiong Pai was bald. This made Ren Baqian equate being bald with being strong. How could one become strong if he was not bald? It was a pity that he could not become strong even if he was bald. Before leaving, Rinpoche even bid farewell to Enfei before leaving. Half an hour later, Rinpoche sat in a restaurant opposite Qin. He did not look much different from before. Rinpoche, on the other hand, had changed a lot. Most importantly, he had put on a lot of weight and his temperament had become more mature. After all, there was always the risk of losing one's life in that world. It was hard not to be calm. "Is there anything you need from me?" Qin sat down and stared at Rinpoche for a long time before suddenly asking. It was not strange for Rinpoche to look for him for a meal. Even though he was not a very proactive person, it was normal for him to look for an old friend after not showing his face for a long time. However, Rinpoche did not look for him for lunch often. It was usually at night. Even though there were no additional programs, everyone was usually very busy at noon. On the contrary, having a meal at night was more leisurely and carefree. "Indeed, there is something. Help me buy some things." Rinpoche nodded his head and said. "What things?" "For you to ask me to buy something for you, it's definitely not something ordinary. Don't tell me it's firearms." Qin was obviously joking. He knew Rinpoche too well. As long as Rinpoche wasn't tricked, he definitely wouldn't touch these things. Then it must be some other troublesome things or some contraband. To him, it was not a problem at all. However, what Rinpoche said next stunned him. "I want firearms, pistols, military crossbows, and grenades," Rinpoche replied calmly. Qin looked at Rinpoche as if he did not know him. He lowered his voice and asked, "What are you trying to do? You have a bright future ahead of you, so don't be impulsive. No matter what it is, I can help you think of a solution. Instead of using the power of the government, you chose to use those underhanded methods. Are you crazy?" Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You are thinking too much. Do I look like that kind of person?" Upon hearing Rinpoche's words, Qin heaved a sigh of relief and said, "You scared me just now. You don't seem to be that daring. I thought you encountered some kind of stimulation. I will be entering the mountains in a few days. It will be dangerous, so I need to bring something to protect myself. Even so, I don't need a grenade, right?" If Rinpoche wanted to enter the mountains with a gun or a crossbow, it would be understandable. But why would he bring a grenade? Carrying things wasn't something that could be played around. "I have already said that it will be dangerous. There will be many wild beasts. Sometimes, a gun isn't that useful," Rinpoche replied. "You can use a rifle. No matter what you encounter, you will be dead after firing a crossbow." Rinpoche shook his head. Using a rifle would be too conspicuous. Even though a military crossbow was filled with a modern industrial vibe, it wasn't as conspicuous as a rifle. Even though the Empress already had some speculations in her heart, she couldn't let others have some suspicions. Furthermore, if she really encountered danger and the opponent was a human, a rifle would easily raise the opponent's vigilance. The concealment of a handgun was much higher. As for a grenade, it gave people the feeling that it was more like a piece of metal. It wasn't so easy to raise people's vigilance. There might even be fools who would use their hands to catch it. Even if they didn't catch it, they wouldn't hide far away. Rinpoche's idea was to use a crossbow for hunting. If he really encountered danger and needed to make a move, he would use a handgun and a silencer. He would try his best not to let others find out and avoid exposing too many things. A handgun, a grenade, a military crossbow, as well as a silencer, bullets and crossbow bolts. The bulletproof vest must be light and anesthetic that can be smeared on the crossbow bolts must be strong. Also, I need a military knife, Rinpoche calmly said. In order to save his life, he had to prepare as much as possible. When Qin heard the things that Rinpoche wanted, he frowned and said, I always feel that you are not going into the mountains. Instead, you are going to war. However, I won't ask too much. I can help you get them. Do you have any requests? Also, when do you need them? I don't have many requests. You know that I don't know anything about these things. I just want them to be as powerful as possible. However, time is tight. I need them by the day after tomorrow at the latest. It would be best if it is tomorrow. In addition, help me find a place where I can practice my shooting skills. I don't know much about this thing. I need to familiarize myself with it, Renbochin said. Chen-Qing nodded his head. A place to practice your shooting skills is easy. I know of a shooting range. As for the other things, I can help you ask around. It shouldn't be a big problem. After finishing his sentence, he took out his phone and made a call. After making 2 calls, he received a text message and forwarded it to Renbochin. Just call this number and tell it is Haizi who asked you to go there. I will contact the shooting range later. I will pass you the phone number. Renbochin nodded his head. These things could be said to be fully equipped. He had already made the best preparations that he could. The rest would have to depend on luck. For the rest of the meal, both parties didn't mention these things again. Just like what Chen-Qing said, as a friend, he would help Renbochin get the things that he needed. He couldn't care less about other things. Renbochin was also very grateful that Chen-Qing didn't ask too many questions. This was also what he liked the most about Chen-Qing. In the afternoon, Renbochin left the restaurant. Upon returning to his car, he dialed the phone number that Chen-Qing gave him. After telling him Haizi's name, the man gave Renbochin 2 ways to make a deal. The first way was to contact him via WeChat. Then, Renbochin would place the gun at a certain location and he would pick it up himself. The other way was for someone to pick it up. Renbochin didn't understand anything and was more inclined to look at the real thing. Naturally, he chose the second way. After which, they went to a certain location. After waiting for a while, a van stopped by the roadside. Other than the driver, there was a man in the back seat. He handed over a mask. Rules. It was a very sturdy man who looked very fierce. If it was the previous Renbochin, he would definitely stay far away from this kind of person. However, after getting used to seeing aboriginals, he felt that this man looked very ordinary and didn't have much of a deterrent force. Renbochin nodded his head and consciously put on the mask. Chen-Qing introduced it, so safety should be guaranteed. After driving for about an hour, Renbochin didn't even know where he was before the van stopped. After Renbochin was brought into the house, he walked down a flight of stairs before the mask was removed. Other than the lights in the surroundings, there was nothing else. It seemed like they were in a basement. There weren't many types of guns in the surroundings. It wasn't as dazzling as what Renbochin had imagined. However, after thinking about it, it made sense. After all, they weren't overseas. There were only a dozen types of guns. There were pistols, rifles, and shotguns. There were 5 types of pistols. There were also 2 crossbows hanging at the side. One was big and the other was small. Both of them had scopes and were hung on the wall. They are here. Take a look. Chapter 91. I don't know much about these things. I need a pistol that is more powerful, has less recoil, and has higher accuracy. Is there a requirement for distance? The man asked. Playing in the woods, I think a distance of tens of meters is the most, Renbochin said. He deliberately used the word play. The man got up and took a black pistol from the shelf and placed it on the table. This is a domestic-made QSG-92, it should meet your requirements. A few days ago, someone on the internet put this gun in the top 10 famous guns list. Although it was a rumor, this gun is really good. Moreover, it is cheap. The only drawback is that it jams sometimes. Is there anything else besides this? Renbochin was a little scared when he heard about jams. If it suddenly jams when he was waiting for help, he would have no place to cry. CZ83, check, safe and reliable. There is a 9M. The man picked up another gun and placed it on the table. What's the difference? Renbochin asked. The 9M is more powerful, but the shooting range is shorter. Renbochin played with the CZ83. Every man was interested in two things, guns and cars. Renbochin was no exception. He never thought he would have the opportunity to own a gun. This one, I want a 9M. The recoil won't be too strong, right? Renbochin immediately said. Anyway, he didn't know much about these things. As long as it was powerful, the recoil wasn't too strong, and it was safe and reliable, it would be fine. Moreover, this gun was very comfortable to hold. For a man, these are all small things. The man laughed. Then, he made Renbochin make a posture of holding the gun with both hands and patted the bottom of his wrists. About this much strength. Following which, Renbochin bought a military crossbow, bullets, spare magazines, crossbow bolts, silencers, 3 grenades, and a 20-centimeter-long military knife. Renbochin spent a sum of money to bring these things back to the car. He was on tenterhooks on the way back, fearing that he would encounter a drunk driver. He never worried in the past, but now there were a lot of prohibited items in the car. If he was caught, it wouldn't just be a tragic ending for him. After returning to that world, Renbochin didn't know what would happen to him after disappearing for a few days in the detention center. He was certain that it wouldn't end well. Fortunately, such a melodramatic thing did not happen. Renbochin successfully sent the items back to his residence. Then, he went to the hospital to get the anesthetic that could be used on the crossbow. For the next 2 days, he spent his time practicing his marksmanship and crossbow at the shooting range. While Renbochin was practicing his spear skills in China, the Empress was sitting in the palace and drinking wine. Not long after, the 7th prince was brought in. Greetings to the Empress of Dao. The 7th prince cupped his fists and said. The other party was the Empress of Dao while he was the Prince of Great Xia. Naturally, he couldn't be too polite. Ever since the 7th prince came in, the Empress had been staring at his face. Why? Does the Empress of Dao find me familiar? The 7th prince asked with a smile. The Empress tapped on the wooden couch with her fingers. She didn't say anything, but her body slightly straightened. You aren't him, so the way you speak is different, the Empress said as she drank a cup of wine. I am the 7th prince of Great Xia. The 7th prince's meaning was obvious. Someone, take a seat. The Empress's cold voice sounded. Immediately, someone placed a chair in the middle of the palace and the 7th prince sat on it. You want to see me, what's the matter? I want to exchange something with the Empress of Dao. I want to use 7 dragon scales to exchange for a bottle of blood. The 7th prince smiled. This was the purpose of his visit to Dao. As for the birthday celebration, he didn't care at all. If it wasn't for the importance of the item he wanted to exchange, why would he come to this barren land? Whether it was the dragon scales or the bottle of blood, they were extremely valuable to him. The Empress didn't even need to think before saying, it's not enough. The price was too little. Even though the dragon scales were valuable and she could use them, it wasn't enough to exchange for the blood. This was because the Empress knew that the blood he wanted was the blood of the Kirin in the palace. However, the blood of that Kirin wasn't pure. In order to exchange for a bottle of the blood, the Kirin would lose a lot of its vitality. It was unknown how long it would take for it to recover. This dragon scale isn't the one in Great Xia's palace. I found it in the surroundings when I first discovered it. It contains the aura of a dragon that has already disappeared. Now, you are the one begging me. The Empress was slightly tempted, but she still didn't relent. Even though the dragon scale was useful, it wasn't a must for her. The fact that the Empress came all the way from Great Xia to Dao was enough to prove the importance of this bottle of blood. The seventh prince had already expected this and wasn't surprised. He nodded his head and said, plus a drop of dried dragon blood that was found at the same time as the dragon scale. Only then did the Empress nod her head. If Renbachian heard the exchange between the two of them, he would probably be shocked and re-evaluate this world. Previously, when he first came to this world, he saw a Kirin. However, he didn't have the chance to see it again. This matter was buried in his heart. However, there was actually a dragon in Great Xia. This meant that this world was much more profound than what he had always thought. I want another person, the seventh prince said again. The Empress frowned. Whether he is an aboriginal or not doesn't matter to the Empress of Dao, the seventh prince said. The Empress thought of the person who looked exactly like the seventh prince and suddenly laughed. Actually, I like your face very much. Every time I see it, I feel very happy. How about this, leave your head to me and then take him away. The seventh prince was slightly stunned. He didn't expect that person to be so important to the Empress of Dao. He thought that a foreigner was insignificant to the Empress. This was a little miscalculation. Since the Empress of Dao wants to keep him, then forget it. The deal is still valid. The seventh prince put on a smile again and said. However, the Empress's next sentence immediately made him freeze. No, I have changed my mind. I hate people who covet my things. On account that you are the Prince of Great Xia, get lost. The Empress waved her big sleeves on the couch. The seventh prince immediately felt a terrifying aura hit him in the face. After a while, the seventh prince returned to the accommodation that was arranged for him in Dao. He frowned and his heart was intertwined with anger and puzzlement. Originally, this deal was already settled. However, in the end, because he wanted to ask Renbachian to come over, it was ruined. Why did this happen? No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't understand why the Empress would make such a decision. That was a drop of blood and a scale left behind by a dragon that had already disappeared. To the Empress of Dao, it was considered a treasure. Your Highness, is the matter not settled? The beautiful lady called Xiao Wu came to his side and asked softly. Chapter 92. Renbachian touched the bulletproof vest, crossbow, firearms, and military knife, and finally felt relieved. On the other side, there were sleeping bags and spices. Renbachian got up and put on the gun holster. After checking the magazine of the gun, he stuffed it in and put on his clothes. Then, he tied the bulletproof vest in the sleeping bag and put it on when he reached the destination. When everything was ready, there was a knock on the door. Sir Ren, it's almost time for the great hunt. Renbachian knew it was Tai Dao's voice, but he didn't expect him to inform him. When he opened the door, the sky was already starting to brighten. Tai Dao was standing outside. Sir, the great hunt is about to start, don't be late. Take this, it will definitely help you get a good ranking in the great hunt, and you might even get the first place. Gun Gun and Tian Tian were bedridden because they were woken up. They hugged Tai Dao's leg and gnawed on it, but Tai Dao didn't even look at them. Anyway, his skin was rough and thick, and they couldn't bite through it. It was just a little itchy. Renbachian looked at the small porcelain bottle in Tai Dao's hand, took it, and asked, "What is this?" Tai Dao said that it could help him get a good ranking in the Great Hunt, so it must be related to hunting. Could it be a knockout drug that could knock out humans and animals within a radius of 100 meters? Then, he could be picky, and only then could he get a good ranking, right? Tai Dao revealed a hearty smile. This was passed down from my ancestors, and it can attract all the wild beasts within a certain range. I don't have the chance to use it, so I'm giving it to you. Renbocchen looked at it and felt the porcelain bottle burning in his hand. He almost threw it away. Are you thinking that I'm not dying fast enough? I might not even be able to defeat a rabbit, and you want me to use this to attract all the wild beasts in the mountains? I reckon I won't even be able to find their corpses. Renbocchen heaved a sigh of relief and asked calmly, Tell me, how much do you hate me? Tai Dao was at a loss. Sir, this is a good thing, and it's hard to find nowadays. This bottle was passed down from my grandfather to my father, and my father passed it down to me. You are a good person, and since you are participating in the great hunt, I decided to give it to you. Renbocchen sighed. It was really hard to reason with this bunch of fools. If I had that kind of strength, would I still need to say it? However, when he thought about it, this thing was really useful. If he encountered any trouble, he could just throw it there. Who knows, it might have a miraculous effect. Thanks. Renbocchen patted Tai Dao's shoulder, put the bottle away, and pointed to the sleeping bag tied with a rope. Help me carry it. All right. Tai Dao swiftly carried the sleeping bag and followed Renbocchen to the cow pen in the beast park. The mountain-gazing bird was there. Renbocchen pulled the mountain-gazing bird out and patted its head twice. The mountain-gazing bird immediately squinted its eyes in comfort. Renbocchen watched as Tai Dao tied the sleeping bag and other items onto the mountain-gazing bird's body. He hung the crossbow and quiver at the side, took out some perfume from the sleeping bag, and sprayed it all over the mountain-gazing bird's body. Then, he flipped over and sat on it. Achoo! As soon as Renbocchen sat on the mountain-gazing bird, he sneezed due to the strong smell of perfume. The mountain-gazing bird seemed to dislike the smell on its body and paced around restlessly. Renbocchen quickly patted its head to appease it. Help me take care of Gun Gun and Tian Tian. Renbocchen called out. Sir, water bag. Tai Dao glanced at it and quickly called out. Renbocchen slapped his forehead. He had almost forgotten about this matter. He rode the mountain-gazing bird to the well, filled the water bag, and left. After leaving the beast park, he went straight to the plaza outside the palace. The assembly point was there. From afar, he could see that the plaza was brightly lit. Torches were set up in the surroundings, and at the same time, the roars of humans and beasts could be heard from afar. When he got closer, he could see that there was already a large group of people at the edge of the plaza. When he got closer, he could see clearly that there were about 200 to 300 people at one side of the plaza. He could tell that they were aboriginals, and there were both men and women talking loudly. The men were all tall and big. Some of them were wearing tight-fitting silk clothes, and some were wearing animal skins. Renbocchen knew that these were the sons and daughters of the court officials. If they were wearing animal skins, it was either because they liked it or because this was the great hunt. Therefore, they dressed more traditionally. The women were about the same. Most of them had good figures and were full of vigor and energy. There wasn't a single one who was slightly plump. Their hair was tied behind their heads, and they looked very heroic. At this moment, these people were talking loudly. It seemed like many of them knew each other. Below them were all kinds of mounts. There were blood-red crooked cows, horses from other countries, goats, and even an elephant. Renbocchen didn't know where he got the elephant from. It was a woman, and the height of her mount made her stand out like a crane among chickens. There was also someone riding a saber-toothed tiger. When the saber-toothed tiger saw that there were so many animals around it, it seemed a little dissatisfied. It let out a low growl, but before it could make a sound, it was slapped on the head by the burly man behind it. Be quiet, don't create trouble for me. Renbocchen looked at the mounts of these people, each one more powerful than the other. Then, he looked at the mountain-gazing bird that he was riding on. It felt like an Alto mixed in with hundreds of luxury cars. He consciously found a place to wait in the periphery and observed the situation. A gentle breeze blew past. Achoo! Achoo! 5 or 6 people who were slightly closer to him sneezed and glared at Renbochin. They had seen Renbochin before. Among them, a few had heard of this Honglu deputy who had recently gained some fame. However, no one paid attention to him. However, the smell from his body or the mountain-gazing bird under his butt was too strong. It wasn't the stench of the mountain-gazing bird, but a kind of pungent aroma that made their noses itch. Renbochin was speechless. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have sprayed so much perfume. He got the mountain-gazing bird to move to the side, further away from those people. There weren't only 200 to 300 people in the plaza. There were also a few rows of soldiers in the middle of the plaza. From a visual estimation, there were about 500 of them. They were all riding on those kind of huge sheep. Only the chest and the left shoulder were covered by leather. The rest of their bodies were completely exposed. At the other end of the plaza, there was another group of people. From afar, he could see a few carriages that he had seen before. Needless to say, these were the people from the other 3 nations. Renbochin didn't recognize any of those second-generation officials. They also didn't care about this Honglu deputy. Renbochin knew quite a few people on the other side, but most of them wished they could skin him alive. Furthermore, he was now an official of Dayo. He couldn't possibly mingle with those people. Renbochin could only wait by himself in the periphery. Fortunately, he didn't have to wait for too long. As the sky started to brighten, the palace gates opened. A few rows of fully armed imperial guards rode out in a single file. Renbochin was very familiar with the attire of these imperial guards. They were imperial guards from the palace. Chapter 93. The imperial guards stopped in front of the 500 cavalrymen and formed into 2 groups. Following which, the Kirin that Renbochin had seen before came out of the palace gate. It was pulling a large imperial carriage that was surrounded by cloth curtains. After the Kirin and the imperial carriage came out, all the cavalrymen and imperial guards held onto their sabers with one hand on their mounts and bowed slightly. "Welcome, Your Majesty." The descendants of the aboriginal officials also sat on their mounts and did the same thing. However, their weapons weren't as neat as those of the imperial guards and cavalrymen. It could be said that there were all kinds of weapons, such as sabers, halberds, hammers, and so on. All of them were hung beside their mounts. Only the people from the other nations didn't make any noise. "Let's set off." The Empress's cold voice sounded. Following the Empress's order, the 500 cavalrymen and imperial guards split into 2 groups. One group led the way while the imperial guards followed behind. The imperial carriage that the Empress was riding on also moved forward slowly. The other group of cavalrymen and imperial guards automatically followed behind the Empress's imperial carriage. Following which, the descendants of the court officials also spurred on their mounts and followed behind. After they left, Renbochin also followed on his mountain-gazing bird. Behind him were the people from the other 3 nations. Many of them looked at Renbochin, who wasn't far in front of them, and sneered. They even deliberately made their voices very loud so that Renbochin could hear them. The mountain-gazing bird's head was 2.5 meters tall, and its back was about 1.4 meters off the ground. Renbochin could ride it, but compared to the other people's mounts, it was like a little chick following behind. It was very cold. Looking at Renbochin in front of them, the Saiyans who had been tormented by him for the past few days suddenly found a sense of superiority and laughed at him. On one hand, it was because the mountain-gazing bird that Renbochin was riding was extremely ugly among the other mounts. It was like a piece of rusty metal mixed into a pile of gold, silver, and jewels. It was an eyesore. Or it could be said that Huang Bo had mixed into a group of handsome men and beautiful women. On the other hand, it was because Renbochin looked lonely. Even though this was Deo, he was still an outsider. Renbochin simply didn't care about those people behind him. His face didn't matter to him, at least compared to his life. On the way out of the city, Renbochin was bored, so he sized up the people in front of him and made guesses. For example, there was a burly man in front who couldn't even sit stably on the back of his mount. His body kept leaning forward and his buttocks were sticking out. Renbochin thought maliciously that this man probably had hemorrhoids. As for whether it was true or not, that was not important. In any case, he didn't dare to ask. He estimated that if he went up and asked, "Brother, do you have hemorrhoids?" If they were on Earth, they would also be glared at, let alone here. There was an 80% chance that they would grab the most convenient weapon in their hands and directly cut him open. Along the way out of the city, the laughter behind them had long since disappeared. After all, the people behind them weren't a bunch of retarded children. Even though they were mocking Renbochin, they couldn't laugh all the way if Renbochin didn't respond. Otherwise, they would feel bored. Not long after he left the city, he saw the sun rising in the distance. When Renbochin was on Earth, he didn't really see the sun rise. It seemed that everyone was used to this natural phenomenon. Unless it was at a specific location, very few people would pay attention to it. However, looking at the fireball here, which was twice the size of the sun on Earth, he still felt that it was somewhat interesting. However, after looking at it for a while, it started to hurt his eyes and he had no choice but to look away. The group of people wasn't slow. Even though they weren't as fast as a car, in this world, whether it was a cow or a sheep, they could still feel the strong wind blowing on their faces when they ran. There was also a large amount of dust that was kicked up by their trampling. This was the main reason why Renbochin kept tilting his head to look at the sun just now. This road was a flattened dirt road. After a large group of mounts ran past, they directly kicked up a cloud of dust. The people behind them were all eating the dust, and Renbochin felt as if he was rushing into a sandstorm. Renbochin buried his head behind the mountain-gazing bird. Unknowingly, an imperial guard appeared beside him and shouted, "Storyteller Ren, Her Majesty is summoning you." Renbochin turned his head to take a look. Indeed, it was Sherhu. Most people thought that his position was a deputy, but this was only temporary. After the Empress's birthday celebration, he would have to return this position. His position was still the palace's storyteller of Qingshin Palace Hall. "Let's go now," Renbochin shouted. Renbochin shouted. Following which, Sherhu turned the mountain-gazing bird to the side and sped up to pass by those second-generation officials, leaving behind a trail of fragrance. When Renbochin passed by them, he turned his head to take a look. Everyone was covered in dust, as if they had just come out from a coal mine. As for their demeanor and imposing manner, they were already beyond the ninth heaven. On the contrary, some of the ladies covered their faces with a piece of cloth. It seemed that regardless of where they came from, they valued their face a lot. Their heads could be chopped off, but their hairstyle could not be messed up. Even though it wasn't right, the meaning was similar. Those people also looked curiously at Renbochin, who was riding on a little chick, as he advanced. With an imperial guard leading the way, they could guess that it was the Empress who summoned him. It seemed that Deputy Ren had recently gained the Empress's favor. It was just that the fragrance from the mountain-gazing bird was too pungent. As the mountain-gazing bird ran in front of them, that perfume went straight into their noses. When Renbochin arrived at the side of the carriage, the curtain in front of the carriage was pulled open. It was Qing Yuan, who waved at Renbochin. Renbochin looked at the moving carriage. How was he going to get on it? Fortunately, he didn't need to think too much. Sherhu stretched out his arm and threw him. Renbochin felt as if he was riding on the clouds. Qing Yuan, who was on the carriage, smiled as she grabbed Renbochin's arm and placed him on the carriage. It was as if they were passing a bowl. Renbochin calmed himself down. He was a little nervous when he was flying in the air just now. Following which, he cupped his hands towards Qing Yuan and said, "Thank you, Miss Qing Yuan." Then, he entered the carriage and paid his respects. The Empress seemed to only like red. At most, she would occasionally reveal her white undergarments. At this moment, she was still dressed like this with her hair tied up with a simple hairpin. The Empress looked at Renbochin carefully. As expected, he was exactly the same as the seventh prince. If she didn't know that Renbochin had a mysterious origin and was even more mysterious than the princes of Great Xia, she would have thought that he was a descendant of the Emperor of Great Xia. "Have you prepared for the great hunt this time?" the Empress asked softly. "I have made some preparations, but your humble servant isn't good at martial arts or hunting. I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to gain anything even if I go up the mountain." "Why don't I tell stories to your majesty at the foot of the mountain? I can also be of some use to relieve your boredom," Renbochin quickly replied. It would be great if the Empress could let him accompany her at the foot of the mountain. However, the Empress didn't care at all and said, "Even if you can't come in first, you still have to gain something. I have high hopes for you. If you can't even hunt, won't you be throwing my face?" Renbochin was speechless. What kind of logic was this? He had never heard that a teacher had to know martial arts and a chef had to be a soldier from the special forces. Chapter 94. Renbochin told the Empress stories for the whole morning. Listening to the stories on the way to their destination was a good way to pass the time. Renbochin also suffered a little less. At least he didn't have to suffer like those people who ate dirt the whole morning and looked like refugees. Even though he was riding a mountain-gazing bird, running for the whole morning was a very tiring task. When it was almost noon, everyone arrived at their destination. It was a flat ground at the foot of the mountain. Beside it was a meandering stream. It was a good place to set up camp. Just as they landed, the 500 cavalrymen spread out and scouted the surroundings. The remaining imperial guards were more for decoration than actual use. The Empress's strength made her completely unafraid of any danger. When Renbochin came out of the carriage, the others had already run to the stream to wash up. The young masters from the other three nations had also set up camp in the distance. In fact, there weren't many tents. Most of them rode in carriages. Only Ning Kaichin, Mr. Emptiness, and a few others got their mounts from somewhere. At noon, almost everyone brought their own food. Only Renbochin came in a hurry after he woke up. Even his water bag had to be reminded by Tai Dao. He didn't bring any food. Fortunately, he had a way. The Empress didn't bring a chef, so he naturally had to prepare the Empress's lunch. There were fruits on the carriage, so Renbochin could prepare some meat. He would cook for the Empress first, then he would ask the imperial guards for some meat and roast it himself. After all, these imperial guards didn't go up the mountain, so they brought food with them. Not long after, an imperial guard brought back a rabbit with a mouth full of fangs and 2 wild birds the size of wild geese. Renbochin instructed the 2 imperial guards to skin and clean the wild birds. He then started a fire. The people in this world used flint. He took out a windproof lighter to start a fire, which attracted the attention of many people nearby. After all, it was much more convenient to use a finger to light a fire than flint. After he lit the fire, a burly man squatted beside him and said, "Brother, I'll exchange something with you for the one that emits fire. Is that okay?" Renbochin turned his head and looked. He seemed to have seen this burly man before. Looking at his clothes, he recognized him. He was the burly man who rode the saber-toothed tiger. Even while squatting, he was still taller than Renbochin. "However, you look like you're in your 30s. Is it appropriate to call me brother? May I know how old you are?" Renbochin asked curiously. He felt that he was still relatively inexperienced. Could it be that the other party didn't even have this little bit of insight? I'll be 17 soon. The big man grinned. The corner of Renbochen's mouth twitched. His face was indeed very mature. You don't have to change. Can you bring me up the mountain? Renbocchen rummaged through the things that were hanging in the sleeping bag just now. All the seasonings were inside. I'm going deep into the mountains. I might not come back at night, the big man said. Renbocchen knew that the great hunt would last from noon today to noon tomorrow. However, most people would return at night. After all, they needed to rest. This person wanted to go deep into the mountains. It seemed like he wanted to find better prey. Renbocchen was a little hesitant. It was much more dangerous at night in the forest than during the day. Previously, Caretaker Sure mentioned that there were many ferocious beasts in the mountains. His original goal was to walk around nearby and kill a few random prey. How about tomorrow? I might need it tonight. When you come out tomorrow, I will give this to you, Renbocchen said. It was just a windproof lighter. It cost a few dozen yuan each. There was no harm in giving him one. One had to know that all the young men and women present today were the children of Dao's officials. Befriending a lighter was a huge profit. Thank you, old brother. My name is Du Chongkong. I will look for you tomorrow after I leave the mountain. Du Chongkong grinned. Renbocchen smiled. After a while, the two wild birds and the rabbit were sent over. Du Chongkong was still squatting beside him. Renbocchen turned his head and asked, "Is there anything else? I see that you have a lot of fun things. Can I play with them?" Du Chongkong grinned as he pointed at the mountain-gazing bird that was chased far away. Renbocchen didn't want to chase it so far away. However, the scent of the mountain-gazing bird's perfume was too strong. You want to see my crossbow, right? Renbocchen thought for a moment and knew that the things hanging on the mountain-gazing bird were the sleeping bag, crossbow, and bolts. That's called a crossbow. I have seen the crossbow from Great Xia. It's different from yours. The big man's eyes were filled with interest. Yours is much better looking. A crossbow manufactured by modern industry was naturally filled with a modern aura. It wasn't something that those ancient crossbows could compare to. Especially when this crossbow was equipped with a scope. Renbocchen saw that the big man was eager to give it a try. He knew that it was already good enough for him to wait here for half a day and greet him. The aboriginals usually acted faster than their brains. Didn't they see that a few rash fellows were already running towards his mountain-gazing bird? Just now, when he passed by the mountain-gazing bird, many people saw the crossbow hanging on its body. Tell them not to break it. I still have to use it to hunt in the mountains, Renbocchen said. All right, I will kick the balls of whoever breaks it. Du Chongkong laughed heartily and ran towards the mountain-gazing bird in big strides. Not long after, a cry of surprise could be heard from the other side. A few people were aiming their crossbows through the scope. The glass of the scope and the ability to see into the distance were very magical in their eyes. They treated it as a treasure and snatched it over and over again. Renbocchen was piercing the rabbits and wild birds with a sharpened wooden stick. He felt a toothache as he looked at the other side. Those fellows had better be careful. If the crossbow was broken, how was he going to hunt in the mountains? Du Chongkong sent one of them flying with a kick. Yes, he was sent flying 7 to 8 meters away. Then, he elbowed another person to the ground. Following which, he ran to the back with the crossbow to show off to someone. Renbocchen couldn't see what was happening behind him as he was blocked by the Imperial Guards. He could only roast the rabbits and birds in peace. However, he could hear the cheers coming from behind him from time to time. When the rabbits and birds were roasted until they were half done, he sprinkled seasonings on them. Not long after, an extremely rich aroma spread far and wide. Many people who smelled the aroma craned their necks to look over to see what was so fragrant. The seasonings that Rinpoche took were only available in the palace and the beast park. Even the big shots in the imperial court didn't know about this, let alone them. After almost an hour, the rabbits and birds were roasted. Rinpoche was sweating profusely. Roasting these things wasn't an easy task. After all, he had to keep turning them to prevent them from getting burnt. After sending the rabbits and birds to the front of the imperial carriage, Qing Yuan went to fetch them. Rinpoche asked for 2 big pieces of mutton from the imperial guards and prepared to cook his dinner. This time, when the meat was just roasted, Rinpoche felt someone sitting beside him. He turned his head and saw Du Changkong grinning at him. "Where's the crossbow? I'll get it for you now." "Leave one for me," Du Changkong shouted as he ran. Rinpoche realized that this 17-year-old Du Changkong with the face of an uncle was really friendly. Not long after, Du Changkong came back with a bitter face. "I'm afraid I can't get your crossbow back. It's in the hands of Hong Lass. I can't defeat her. You promised me previously. In the end, you can't even defeat a woman and you came back empty-handed. Do you still have the prestige and ambition of a man? Can you still find a wife in the future? Others will look down on you. A man's words are like spilled water. Even if you die, you must keep your words. If you can't keep your words, can you still be called a man?" Rinpoche instigated in a low voice. As for who Hong Lass was, he didn't care at all. After being instigated by Rinpoche, Du Changkong had a determined look on his face. "Don't worry. I'll definitely get back what I promised you. I'll fight it out with Hong Lass." After finishing his sentence, he left with an imposing aura of a hero who would never return. Rinpoche looked at his back view and nodded his head. This 17-year-old rash youth was indeed unable to be provoked. Chapter 95. Hong Xian, let's have a match. If I win, you will give me that crossbow. I promise to return it to someone else. You can't expect me to go back on my words and become a ballless woman. Rinpoche was roasting the meat when he heard a loud shout from behind. Immediately, black lines appeared on his forehead. "Go back on your words and become a ballless woman. Did you get kicked in the head by a donkey? You're really afraid that you won't die fast enough." Rinpoche turned his head and looked at the carriage behind him. He felt that the Empress would mark him down in her book. Regardless of whether he won or lost, he would be punished in the future. Rinpoche felt that he had to stay away from Du Changkong in the future to avoid being implicated. If pig-headed teammates were divided into 4 grades, A, B, C, and D, Du Changkong would definitely be S grade. The meat was almost done roasting. Rinpoche immediately took the stick with 2 pieces of roasted meat and ran to the back to watch the show. Rinpoche reckoned that Du Changkong would definitely not die, but he would definitely be beaten up. Storyteller Ren. Just as Rinpoche got up, he heard Qing Yuan calling him. He turned his head and saw her waving at him. He quickly ran over. However, Qing Yuan's expression was a little weird, which made Rinpoche have a bad feeling. He climbed into the carriage and saw the Empress looking at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. "What did you say to him just now?" Rinpoche's face turned green. Was he on fire now? After all, Du Changkong just said a few words and ran to the back to shout. He wouldn't believe it if he said that he didn't say anything. "Your Majesty is wise, this has nothing to do with me. In my heart, women can hold up half of the sky. I really don't know what triggered him to say such a thing. I only said that a man should keep his words. Since he took the crossbow away, he should get it back. What he said has nothing to do with me." Rinpoche quickly cried out his grievances. The Empress looked at Rinpoche, flicked her sleeves, and Renbochin felt as if he was riding on a cloud and flew away. He fell on his butt. Even though it was grass, it still made him grimace. Renbochin wanted to cry but no tears came out. He was actually tricked by a 17-year-old fool. He hoped that the Empress wouldn't remember him in the book. Rubbing his butt, he picked up the skewer and limped to the back of the car. Just a moment ago, he wanted to watch the show. Now, he gritted his teeth and wanted to see how that idiot would get beaten up. Just now, this circle was bustling with noise and excitement. Some people were roasting meat, some were chatting, and the girl sitting on the back of the elephant was holding a crossbow and looking into the distance through the scope. Her eyes were filled with curiosity. Although the scope's ability to see into the distance wasn't strong, it still had a certain effect. It could clearly see into the distance, which really made the girl very curious. Compared to the treasures in the mansion, it was much more interesting to her. Near the girl, there were also a few men and women sitting on the ground, occasionally looking up at the girl on the back of the elephant, waiting for her to have enough fun. At this moment, Du Changkong had a determined look on his face as if he was ready to die a martyr. He walked 20 meters in front of the girl and shouted, "Hong Xian, let's have a match. If I win, you will give me the crossbow. I promised that I would return it when the time comes. You can't let me go back on my word and become a ballless woman." In a split second, the entire place quietened down. Everyone turned to look at him. The only difference was that all the men were astonished and did not know what was wrong with him. Following which, a few burly men laughed out loud, "Ballless woman. Ha 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 ha, I'm dying of laughter." At first, the girl was astonished, followed by anger. She glared at Du Changkong as if she wanted to kill him. What did he mean by that? Go back on his word and become a ballless woman. These words were too vicious. He included all the female aboriginals in the crowd. More importantly, he even included Her Majesty, who was in the carriage. However, Du Changkong was still unconsciously looking at the girl on the back of the elephant with a provocative look. The girl named Hong Xian was about 17 or 18 years old. After she recovered from her astonishment, the veins on her forehead throbbed. She glared fiercely at Du Changkong and threw the crossbow to someone nearby. She twisted her body and flipped down from the back of the elephant. "You said ballless woman." Hong Xian stared at Du Changkong as if she wanted to kill him. "Do all of you have them?" At this moment, Du Changkong was still encouraged by Renbochin's provocation. His blood rushed to his head. "Pfff, ha 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 ha." After a short period of silence, an even crazier laughter erupted. This time, it wasn't only the few men who laughed. Almost all the men in the crowd burst into laughter. They laughed while wiping their tears. Did this Du Changkong eat tiger's guts today? Bastard, since you want to die so badly, I'll grant your wish. Hong Xian's originally delicate face had turned green and the veins on her forehead were popping out. Du Changkong looked at Hong Xian, who was about to go crazy from anger. Suddenly, he felt guilty. Did he provoke her too much? However, it was too late for him to hide now. There were so many people watching. If he were to hide now, he would be too ashamed to face anyone in the future. He made up his mind and said, "If I win, you have to return me the crossbow. I took it from someone else anyway." If Renbochin was here, he would definitely be touched. This silly fellow was about to be skinned alive, yet he was still thinking about his crossbow. What a chivalrous man. However, Renbochin was currently rubbing his butt on the ground. He was hoping that Hong Xian would not hold back and beat him to death. By the time he limped over, there was already a big circle surrounding him. Du Changkong, you are a man now. You must persevere for a while longer. Du Changkong, I have high hopes for you. Don't embarrass yourself. Hong Xian, teach him a good lesson. When Renbachien came over, he heard the chaotic cheers. They were just there to watch the show and not meddle in other people's business. Everything in the field had been moved away. On the rather big field, there was only Du Changkong and a lady dressed in green clothes facing each other with a distance of 10 meters between them. Is this Hong Xian? I wonder what is her relationship with Hong Wan? Renbachien pondered. In any case, the two of them did not look alike. They probably only had the same surname. Just as Renbachien stood still in the periphery, the two people in the field collided with each other. Both parties were exchanging blows. In terms of size, Du Changkong was much bigger than Hong Xian. However, it did not mean that the bigger the size, the more powerful one was. Otherwise, the Empress would not be the #1 expert in Dayo and Du Changkong would not have such a bitter face at the start. Both parties only exchanged a few blows and Du Changkong was sent flying. Those with good eyesight could see that Hong Xiao had blocked Du Changkong's arm with both of her fists. Immediately, Du Changkong could not control his arm and his fists smashed into Du Changkong's chest. Renbachien could not see all these. Even though their movements were not flashy, they were too fast for him. Du Changkong rolled on the ground, got up and collided with Hong Xian again. However, this time around, he was sent flying even faster. Just as they collided, a bang was heard and he was sent flying. Even though Renbachien could not see clearly from the side, he could feel the pain when he heard the sound of Du Changkong crashing heavily on the ground. Did you say that people who don't keep their promises are the same as women without balls? Who are you calling untrustworthy? What's wrong with women? The entire field could only see Hong Xian kicking Du Changkong around like a ball. Without waiting for him to get up, she sent him flying with another kick. If it was an ordinary person, he would have been kicked to death. However, Du Changkong was able to withstand the beatings. Every time, he would defend his vital parts. Even though he was kicked everywhere, he was still able to get up. Seeing him being beaten up like a ball, the crowd roared with laughter. Chapter 96. Fortunately, Hong Xian did not want to kill him. She had been conserving her strength. Seeing that Du Changkong was unable to get up, she spat on him. Good job, Hong Xian. A few people cheered and went over to hug Hong Xian. Seeing that there was no more show to watch, the rest dispersed. A few people went forward to check on Du Changkong's injuries. There were no major problems, just some minor injuries. Coupled with the fact that he had lost all his strength, he would not be able to get up for a while. Renbachien looked at Du Changkong lying on the ground and sighed. He had to go and check on this useless teammate of his. Can you still get up? Renbachien squatted beside Du Changkong and asked. Hong Xian is getting more and more powerful. She was too ruthless and I almost lost my life. Du Changkong's face did not have many injuries, but his body was bruised and swollen. He was gasping for air as he lay there. Renbachien did not utter a word. It was good enough that you were still alive. Even if he did not understand what was going on, he knew that Hong Xian did not hit him too hard. Just by looking at how Hong Xian was able to send him flying with just a few blows, he knew that Hong Xian was much more powerful than him. If Hong Xian had the intention, would you still be here groaning now? Do you think you are just going to get beaten up? I reckon that you will suffer in the future. Thinking about Hong Xian, Renbachien hesitated if he should ask Hong Xian for his crossbow. He reckoned that Hong Xian was still angry and it would be troublesome for him to get it back. Forget it. Fortunately, he still had a pistol. Originally, he wanted to keep the pistol for a sneak attack. Now, he could only be more careful and try not to be noticed by others. As long as he was not seen hunting with a pistol, no one would know what it was. Renbachien ignored Du Changkong and got up to leave. On the other side, Hong Xian and the people around her saw Renbachyan squatting beside Du Changkong. Hong Xian was furious. I was wondering why that bastard was so daring today. I heard that there is a Honglu deputy who is not from Dayo. I reckon that it is him. He is quite daring. I will go and teach him a lesson, a lady immediately said. The rest did not object. After all, a Honglu deputy, and a foreigner at that, was not worthy of the attention of the children of the court officials. In particular, when she thought about how that scoundrel Du Changkong must have been taught by this brat, she felt even more disgusted with Renbachyan than with Du Changkong. Just as Renbachyan got up and walked a few steps back, he saw a young lady, who was about 1.65 meters tall and had tanned skin. She was wearing tight-fitting clothes that made it easy for her to move around, and she was walking in his direction. Behind him was Du Changkong. However, Du Changkong had just been beaten up like a dog and it did not seem like he was looking for him. Moreover, Du Changkong's gaze was always on him. Renbachyan still took a step to the side. If the other party wasn't looking for him, he could just walk over. However, his efforts were in vain. The other party was coming for him. Did you teach him those words? The woman asked him politely. Of course not. Renbachyan naturally shook his head. He couldn't take the blame for this. If he did, he would be in big trouble. Bah, a coward who dares to do it but doesn't dare to admit it, the woman said in disdain. Renbachyan was speechless. Did she really think that he was the one who taught her? He did ask him to bring back the crossbow, but he didn't expect him to add so much drama. It really wasn't me. Whether it was or not, don't even think about taking that thing back. Next time, if you have the ability, come over yourself. Don't let others look down on you, coward. The woman had a look of disdain on her face. After she finished speaking, she couldn't be bothered to look at Renbachyan anymore and walked straight away. Renbachyan stood at the same spot for a while and suddenly laughed. Even though you are the son of an official, I am the son of an official. In any case, I am a secondary class, rank 6 deputy. You can do whatever you want to me. Do you really think that I am easy to bully and that anyone can pinch me for no reason? It was impossible for him not to be angry. He was still a young man. Even though his arms couldn't run horses, he was still a young man. Naturally, he was angry to be treated like this. Initially, he didn't want the crossbow, but now, he really had to get it back. Otherwise, how would he be able to mingle in Dayo in the future? If he could pinch anyone who came over, he would be labeled as a coward. In the future, if someone wanted to do the same to him, what would he do? The Empress was just beside him. How could she not notice the current situation? Perhaps it wasn't a big deal now, and she was too lazy to speak. But if he was a coward, what would she think? Renbachyan didn't think that the Empress, who was the 7th most powerful expert in the world, would think that he was a coward. How could he still use a subordinate who could be pinched by a few brats who came from an official's family? Thinking of this, Renbachyan wore a smile on his face as he walked step by step towards the red line. That woman had just walked back to the red line and muttered, "A coward who dares to do it but doesn't dare to admit it." However, she immediately realized that the others were looking in the direction she came from. She turned her head and saw the coward from before walking towards them with a smile on his face. However, that smile was a little cold. Renbachyan walked to the front of them, pointed to the crossbow in one of their hands and said, "That thing is mine." "Not anymore." The woman from before turned around and looked up. "What official position do you have?" Renbachyan asked with a smile. "Why do you care what official position I have? Your secondary class, rank 6 deputy is nothing in my eyes." That woman sneered. The others laughed as well. Indeed, a rank 6 deputy was nothing in their eyes. If it was an aboriginal, they wouldn't go overboard. However, since it was a foreigner, they had nothing to fear. Renbochin looked at their unbridled expressions and the smile on his face became even colder. He enunciated each word clearly. I don't care what official positions your ancestors, your grandfather, or your father have. That's them, not you. They can receive salaries from the imperial court, but that salary isn't for you. Usually, when people give in to you, it's not because you are amazing, but because they don't want to embarrass you because of your ancestors. What qualifications do you have to look down on a secondary class, rank 6 deputy? Even if it's a rank 9 official, as long as he receives a salary from the imperial court, even if he doesn't make any contributions to Dayo, he will still work hard. The foundation of this nation is their blood and sweat. You may look down on me, but my official position was conferred by Her Majesty. I receive a salary from the imperial court, so I work for Her Majesty and represent the imperial court. What qualifications do you have to look down on me? You dare to rob an official appointed by the imperial court. Are you even worthy? You really don't care about the imperial court and the Empress's reputation. Do you dare to kill an official? If you dare to rob, why wouldn't you dare to kill? After Renbochin finished speaking word by word, the scene immediately quietened down. Even the surroundings quietened down. Renbochin's voice wasn't soft, and many people heard him. Everyone shifted their gaze between Renbochin and those few people. Many people stopped what they were doing and stood up. The smiles on those few people's faces had long froze, and the gazes of the others made them feel as if they were being pricked by needles. You actually dare to teach me a lesson. That woman looked incredulous. She then shouted, Who do you think you are? I'm not your father, so I really don't dare to teach you a lesson. As for who I am, you can ask Her Majesty what kind of official I am. It seems that your ancestors and I are the same, Renbochin said maliciously. He was relying on the fact that none of the aboriginal youths who participated in the Great Hunt had an official position. Those with official positions wouldn't participate in the Great Hunt. After participating in the Great Hunt, these people would probably be assigned to the army or other places. However, that was a matter for the future. Renbochin was an exception. He was a secondary class, rank 6 deputy who fell from the sky. He was personally selected by the Empress to participate in this great hunt and was different from the others. That woman was infuriated by him calling her father and ancestor. She raised her hand and was about to slap this bastard to death. Renbochin's back was drenched in cold sweat. Someone quickly come and stop this silly woman. If she slapped him, he would really be dead meat. It would be too late even if the other party was severely punished. However, he maintained his composure on the surface and looked at those few people with a smile on his face. Sparrow Hawk, stop. A loud shout came from nearby. At the same time, Hong Xian's unsightly expression finally changed. She kicked that woman called Sparrow Hawk's arm away. Don't stop me, I'll kill him. Sparrow Hawk's eyes were red. It seemed that Renbochin's words had infuriated her. You really dare to kill an official appointed by the imperial court? Are you trying to rebel? Renbochin sneered. He knew that the other party hated him to death, so he didn't mind if she hated him a little more. Chapter 97. Following Renbochin's words, a burly man appeared beside Renbochin and glared at the lady opposite him. Sparrow Hawk, he's right. How dare you disrespect an official appointed by the imperial court? Shi Yueya, what did you say? The lady named Sparrow Hawk looked over in disbelief. Everyone else understands except for you. I'm an official appointed by the imperial court. No matter what, I represent Her Majesty and the imperial court. What are you trying to do? How dare you rob and kill an official in front of Her Majesty? This shows how bold you are, Renbochin said coldly. At this moment, a few more figures appeared beside Renbachien and looked at the lady named Sparrow Hawk. Even though they were young and had the backing of their fathers, Renbachien's words made them understand one thing. Renbachien represented Her Majesty and was part of the dynasty that was forged by their ancestors. If Renbachien did something wrong, Her Majesty could punish him, and so could his superiors. They really didn't have the right to do so. If they attacked Renbachien, they would be disrespecting the rules of the dynasty that was forged by their ancestors. They would be everyone's enemy. Furthermore, Her Majesty was right beside them. How dare you attack? How bold are you? Hong Xian's face turned ugly, but she had already understood what was going on. That was why she stopped Sparrow Hawk. The others also understood what was going on and didn't dare to speak. The others also understood and stood on Renbachien's side. Even though most of these children knew each other. However, Renbachien's words and Sparrow Hawk's behavior made them forget about their old friendship. In a short period of time, 10 more figures appeared beside Renbachien. Only Sparrow Hawk was overwhelmed by anger. However, the situation in front of her made her feel as if a basin of ice water had been poured over her. The cold gazes of the others suddenly reminded her of what she had done just now. She wasn't smart, but she wasn't a fool either. If she were to act foolishly in such a situation, she wouldn't be able to survive. It's our fault. We'll return the things to you. Even though Hong Xian knew that she couldn't refute the other party's words, she couldn't help but treat them coldly since they had put them in such a situation. Renbachien caught the crossbow thrown over. He didn't need to think to know that he had already offended them and might as well vent his anger. Moreover, although his attitude was unyielding, he was still the reasonable one, after all. The other party would not be able to find trouble with him in a short period of time. When the limelight was over and the other party wanted to find trouble with him, he felt that his position in the Empress's heart would be even more important. He still didn't know that the Empress had flipped the table with the 7th Prince of Great Xia because of him. Even though it wasn't entirely because of him, it also showed that he had a certain place in the Empress's heart. If an apology works, then what's the point of the law? Do you really think that His Majesty doesn't know what happened here? Instead of apologizing, why don't you admit your guilt yourself? After saying this, Renbachien didn't look at them anymore. He cupped his hands toward the people around him and said, "Thank you, everyone. There's no need to thank me. You are right. Dayo was founded by our ancestors. My grandfather and father have shed their blood for Dayo. Every inch of Dayo is the blood of our ancestors. For them, we can't allow anyone to trample on them, because this is trampling on the bones of all our ancestors." Shi Yueya, who was the first to appear beside Renbachien, said in a deep voice. As he spoke to Renbachien, his gaze was still on young Sparrow Hawk. Renbachien looked at this person in astonishment. What he said was pretty standard. I didn't expect that. I was muddle-headed from anger just now, young Sparrow Hawk said softly and lowered her head. At this moment, everyone's gaze really made her a little afraid. Until now, she still didn't know how things turned out this way. She just felt that the words that Renbachien taught Du Changkong were really hateful and wanted to teach him a lesson. However, the result was something that she didn't expect. Hong Xian pulled young Sparrow Hawk and said, "I will go with you to Her Majesty to apologize." Renbachien's words just now were very clear. Her Majesty wasn't far away and it was impossible for her not to hear it. They had made a huge mistake and had to apologize to Her Majesty. Young Sparrow Hawk was in tears. No matter what, she was still a young girl. This kind of situation made her a little flustered. Hong Xian pulled young Sparrow Hawk to look for Her Majesty to apologize. Along the way, everyone looked at them coldly, making them feel even more uncomfortable. In the distance, the young masters from the other 3 nations had already noticed that there seemed to be a conflict here. One of them was that mad dog. Because they couldn't get close, they could only hear a little of the conversation that was carried by the wind. However, they were watching the show from afar, thinking that it would be really satisfying if that mad dog was taught a lesson. What surprised them was that there were actually quite a number of Aboriginals standing behind that mad dog. Were they supporting him? That mad dog actually had such a high status in Deo. This was something that they didn't expect. Didn't Deo always discriminate against foreigners? How could there be so many people standing on his side? The other side was obviously made up of a few Aboriginals. As the two of them left, the rest also dispersed. No one bothered about Rinpochen anymore. The few people who stood with Hong Xian just now also didn't look at him anymore. Just now, Rinpochen was indeed in the right, but it didn't mean that others would like him. On the contrary, young Sparrow Hawk's mentality was actually the mentality of many people. After being exposed by Rinpochen, it would be strange if they had a good impression of him. However, in that kind of situation just now, Rinpochen had a righteous cause and the others had to stand on his side. Rinpochen held the crossbow in one hand and the barbecued meat in the other. He was somewhat helpless. In fact, he didn't want things to turn out this way. But he had to do it at that time. He originally had a lot of good stuff. If anyone could take advantage of them, then he would have a lot of trouble in the future. Snatching a crossbow wasn't actually that important, but what about the other things? He carried the things back to the mountain-gazing bird and placed the crossbow on the ground. Then, he sat down and started to eat the cold barbecued meat. It didn't taste as good after it cooled down, but he was already very hungry. If he didn't eat now, he wouldn't have the strength to go up the mountain in the afternoon. From his angle, he could see Hong Xian and young Sparrow Hawk kneeling on one knee in front of the Empress's carriage. In fact, Rinpochen quite liked the Deo people kneeling on one knee. At least it was more comfortable than kneeling on both knees, right? If he were to kneel on both knees, he would feel a little uncomfortable. After all, he had been educated for decades that a man's knees were gold. Kneeling on one knee was no longer a problem. After finishing a piece of barbecued meat, he was almost full. He collapsed on the grass. To be honest, he was quite nervous just now, but now he could finally relax. As for whether those people would take revenge on him in the future, he didn't even want to think about it now. He would think about it after he came down from the mountain. After lying down for a while, someone appeared beside him and took the remaining piece of barbecued meat and started to eat it. Needless to say, it was Du Chongkong, who was beaten like a dog just now. "Brother, you are really amazing." Du Chongkong didn't forget to praise Rinpochen as he ate. Even though he couldn't get up from the shock just now, he still saw what happened. He admired Rinpochen very much. "You are really a coward, being kicked around like a ball," Rinpochen casually said. After hearing this, Du Chongkong's face turned black. Hong Xian has become more powerful after not seeing her for a year. This time around, not many people can beat her. Even though he was refuting, he felt a little powerless. What's the relationship between Hong Xian and Hong Wuan? Rinpochen remembered that both of them had the surname Hong and couldn't help but ask. "It seems like there is no relationship," Du Chongkong replied after thinking for a while. He really didn't know much about Hong Wuan. However, Hong Xian is Sir Hong Wu's granddaughter. "Who's Sir Hong Wu?" Rinpochen asked curiously. "He's the second most powerful person in Deo. I wonder when I can become that powerful." Du Chongkong had a look of longing on his face. Second in Deo. Just slightly weaker than the Empress. Rinpochen also felt that Hong Wu was indeed very powerful. Following which, he sat up abruptly. "Hong Wu, the ninth most powerful person in the world." "Yes, Sir Hong Wu is too powerful." Du Chongkong was still looking forward to it. However, Rinpochen felt a toothache. Hong Wu was the ninth most powerful person in the world. He had offended the granddaughter of the ninth most powerful person in the world. Chapter 98. Renbochin chatted with Du Chongkong for a while, and at the very least, he knew the identities of these people. The other was Hong Xian, the granddaughter of the ninth most powerful expert in the world, Hong Wu. Her father was called Hong Qing, and he was a military officer stationed in the southern residence, where the remnant citizens of the Han nation resided. He also had two older brothers who also served in the army. That Shi Yuia's father was Shi Wandu, the Protector General of the South and Hong Chang's immediate superior. As for the young sparrow hawk, her name was Lu Ruoyao. Her mother was the Imperial Treasury's treasurer, who was in charge of money. His father was the assistant minister of the Ministry of War. His mother was a secondary third rank, while his father was a primary fourth rank. As for Du Chongkong, when he introduced himself, he said proudly, "My father is the general of the left guard." Renbochin gritted his teeth. They were indeed the children of big shots. There were a total of 5 protectorates in Dayo. The Protector General of each protectorate was the highest-ranking military officer. The 5 protectorates were in charge of the military forces of the 5 regions. Moreover, as a Protector General, even if he wasn't as strong as the world's number 9 expert, Hong Wu, he wouldn't be too weak. There was no need to talk about Lu Ruoyao's parents. One was in charge of money, and the other was in charge of the soldiers' salaries and equipment. As for Du Chongkong's father, the general of the left guards, he was secondary class, rank 3. He was also one of the 2 guards that protected Lan City and could be considered as the Empress's trusted aide. At the very least, he knew who he had offended this time. Du Chongkong finished the remaining piece of barbecued meat, but it was only enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. He was barely able to prevent himself from starving. He could only wait until he reached the top of the mountain to think of a way to get some food. "Do you guys have any martial arts?" Renbochin asked curiously. He had long wanted to learn cultivation methods. However, Caretaker Shi and Xiong Pai only knew how to temper the body. Those were the methods used by the Aboriginals, and they were the inferior ones. If Renbochin used those methods, he would probably burn himself to death in no time. He had a lot of guesses about the Qingxin Palace Hall, but he hadn't learned many characters yet, so naturally, he didn't have the chance to search for it. Moreover, he reckoned that the real good stuff was on the 2nd floor, where there was an old lady watching over it. It was rare for Renbochin to get to know the son of an official. A 3rd-rank official should have some good stuff in his hands, right? Cultivation method. You can't learn from my family. However, I do have a few books from Great Xia at home. If you want it, give me something good to exchange for it. Alright, I'll look for you when I get back. Renbochin was overjoyed to hear this. There were always some things on earth that could move him, as long as he was willing to exchange them. Your fire starter is not good enough. You need something good. Du Chongkong did not forget to remind him. Don't worry, it's definitely something good, Renbochin immediately replied. Not long after, he heard the sound of a horn. It's about to start, Du Chongkong called out to Renbochin and ran into the distance. After that, the others also gathered there and stood in a few messy rows. Renbochin followed her and found a corner to stand at. After waiting for the young masters to gather in groups of 3 or 5, a woman in armor stood in front of everyone. Under the armor was a woman full of heroic spirit. She was Axayenje, the commander of the palace guards, whom Renbochin had met a few times. Now, the great hunt begins. His Majesty wants to see your bravery, and your bravery will be displayed through your prey. The top 3 can enter the 2nd floor of Qingxin Hall to study for 3 days. This is your reward, and also your honor. For Dayo. The people around them shouted. The shouts of hundreds of people were like a tsunami, completely displaying the advantage of the Aboriginals' loud voices. Even though it was just a few words, Rinpoche was somewhat influenced by the shouts of the others. For the tribe. And everyone, if you are in the top 3, you will get the same reward. Xange's words moved the hearts of the other young masters. Other than people like the 7th prince, not many people could resist the temptation of the Imperial Library of Dayo. Dismissed. Come back before noon tomorrow, Xange ordered. Everyone cupped their fists at her and left in 2s and 3s. Seeing that everyone had dispersed, Rinpoche strolled to the side of the net mountain bird and took off his sleeping bag. His bulletproof vest and other things were tied up inside. Just now, when Xange said that the top 3 could enter the 2nd floor of Qingxin Hall to study for 3 days, he was a little tempted. There must be something good on the 2nd floor of Qingxin Hall. Unfortunately, he knew his limits. Even if he had a pistol, he didn't think he could beat those humanoid Gundams. It was better for him to honestly ascend the mountain and come back. It would be more suitable for him to exchange things with Du Changkong. Furthermore, by getting on Du Changkong's good side, he should be able to exchange things with others through him. He didn't know if the glass cup could fool this group of people. When the time comes, he could add a song called Grape Wine in the Luminous Glass Cup, and it would immediately become pretentious. In any case, there were plenty of good things, and he wasn't worried that he wouldn't be able to exchange them. Rinpoche unhurriedly packed up his things. He put aside the crossbow, anesthetic, military knife, and other things that he was going to bring up the mountain and prepared to put on the bulletproof vest. The bulletproof vest wasn't just for protection against guns. It could also protect against all kinds of physical attacks. It was a life-saving tool. Storyteller Ren. Rinpoche quickly got up upon hearing this voice. Xange was standing behind him. Her Majesty said that she wants to eat mountain wolf meat and needs Storyteller Ren to bring it back. Come back when you find it. Rinpoche's heart tightened. What did she mean by wanting to eat mountain wolf meat? Didn't she want him to go up the mountain to look for wolves? If she really wanted to eat it, why would she need him? If she couldn't find it, would he have to stay on the mountain at night? This was obviously a punishment. Was this because of Du Changkong or because of Hong Xian and Lu Ruoyao? Rinpoche shouldn't be punished for what happened afterward. It was most likely because of Du Changkong's pig-headed teammate who added drama for him. Her Majesty also said that most of the mountain wolf meat isn't tasty, but there will definitely be a small wolf with short front legs that tastes the best. Even meeting a wolf depended on luck. Was she asking him to look for a pack of wolves? Didn't she want to see his physique? If he went, he would be directly fed to the wolves. I have a matter to discuss with Her Majesty. I'll have to trouble you to pass on the message, Rinpoche said to Xange. I have passed on the message. Let's see if Her Majesty wants to see you. Xange turned around and returned to the carriage. Rinpoche absent-mindedly waited for the Empress to summon him. A pack of wolves with short front legs. Wasn't this embarrassing? Was there really such a thing? But could he really catch this thing? Even if he didn't have a target, it wouldn't be easy for him to survive in the forest. Furthermore, she wanted him to find this thing. Wasn't this asking for his life? A few minutes later, Rinpoche was summoned to the carriage. The Empress said lazily, "What do you want to tell me?" Chapter 99. When the Empress heard what Rinpoche said, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After looking at him for a while, she said, "You were so awe-inspiring just now, why are you so timid now?" Rinpoche said cautiously, "I was speaking the truth just now. Regardless of whether they are a rank 9 official or an unranked official, they have all contributed and bled for Dayo. They can be punished for their mistakes, but they can't be treated casually by others just because they have a better family background. Those meritorious people, those soldiers who have shed blood for the nation, will be bitterly disappointed if they encounter such a thing. The Empress smiled. I didn't say that you did anything wrong. In fact, she saw what Rinpoche did and it was to her liking. Nowadays, some of the sons of high-ranking officials were indeed somewhat domineering. Normally, she would turn a blind eye to you being domineering, but if you dare to rob and beat up the officials of the imperial court, who do you think you are? Your Majesty, you want me to look for that wolf. With my current physique, I can't even lift my shoulders or lift my arms. Even killing a chicken will take a lot of effort. I'm afraid I won't be able to return, Rinpoche said. Don't you want to go to the second level of Qingxin Palace Hall to take a look? The treasures of the Han Nation's royal family are all there. If you can find a suitable wolf, even though you might not be able to become an expert, you will at least be able to gain something. The Empress was smiling all along. I want to take a look, but I know my limits. Rinpoche lowered his head and replied honestly. It doesn't matter if you don't have the strength to fight a chicken or if you have other tricks up your sleeves. In any case, I want to see that mountain wolf. If you can't catch it, it's fine as long as you stay on the mountain for a night. Just take it as your punishment for teaching that kid from the Du family. If it was someone else, it wouldn't be so easy. Furthermore, there aren't many people who would bargain with me like this. The Empress glared at Rinpoche and gave him a look that said, if you dare to bargain again, I will teach you a lesson. When Rinpoche heard that, he immediately put on a long face and said, Your Majesty, I am willing to do anything for you. I won't hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. Even though he wasn't the one who taught Du Changkong those tricks, it seemed that it was useless to say anything at this moment. I will be waiting for your mountain wolf. Remember to get the one with the shorter legs as it tastes better. After the Empress finished speaking, Rinpoche left with a sullen face. He sighed and returned to the mountain-gazing bird's side. He took off his jacket and holster and put on the bulletproof vest before putting it back on. At the same time, a waist pouch hung behind him. It was filled with anesthetic and some bullets. The saber was strapped to his leg. Finally, with the crossbow on his back and the crossbow in his hand, he randomly chose a direction to go up the mountain. Just now, when he went to see the Empress, the others had already gone their separate ways and headed up the mountain. The mountain stretched as far as the eye could see, and no one knew how big they were. Otherwise, if it was just a small hill, it wouldn't be able to contain any ferocious prey, and there would be no need to come here to hunt. Following behind Rinpoche were some young masters from the three nations. After they were done with their preparations, they ascended the mountain unhurriedly. To them, this was just a game. Even though the Empress's reward was very tempting, not many people actually put it into action. After all, there were still 200 to 300 ancient race youths. It wouldn't be easy to fight them for the top 3 spots. Only a small number of confident people plunged into the mountain at the first instance. It seemed that very few people came to this mountain. It was filled with tall trees that could be hugged with both hands. Once one entered the forest, it became dark. The tall canopy of the trees blocked most of the sunlight. Rinpoche carried the crossbow with an arrow. He didn't walk far in before he started to feel inconvenient. There were vines everywhere, and he had no choice but to pull out his saber to chop the vines before he could move forward. After walking for less than an hour, he didn't see anyone else in the surroundings. It was quiet all around, and only the occasional chirping of birds and the howling of unknown beasts could be heard. This kind of environment made Rinpoche a little nervous. After all, this was a forest from another world. Before coming here, he already knew that there were many ferocious beasts here. F***ck, Rinpoche suddenly cursed. Suddenly, a stick stood up not far from his feet. Upon closer inspection, it was a snake that was as thick as the mouth of a cup. It raised its head and almost scared him to death. Renbochin stood rooted to the ground and didn't know whether he should retreat or not. If he made an inappropriate move and got bitten by the snake, he would be wronged. He also didn't know if this snake was extremely poisonous. It would be a joke if he was poisoned to death as soon as he entered. Renbochin slowly took 2 steps back. He didn't dare to move too much for fear of angering the other party. After he took 2 steps back, the snake lowered its head and burrowed into the bushes at the side. Phew! Renbochin heaved a sigh of relief. He was really nervous to death just now. After this experience, Renbochin finally learned his lesson. He found a small tree and chopped off a branch from it. After peeling off the branch, he used it as a stick and swept it in front of him while walking. This way, he could chase away any snakes on the ground. Very soon, this stick came into effect. However, it wasn't on the ground. Instead, it was on a hanging vine. After sweeping it with the stick, it immediately came to life. After that, Renbochin became even more careful. He felt very bitter in his heart. This place was simply dangerous for him. After walking for a while, he suddenly heard a sound that sounded like a cat's meowing in front of him. He immediately stopped in his tracks. Soon after, the bushes in front of him started to rustle, and it seemed like something was about to emerge from it. Renbochin immediately raised his crossbow and aimed at the bushes. He was prepared to shoot at anything that emerged from it. As the bushes shook, a white rabbit head appeared. It was about the size of a dog and had a mouth full of fangs. Renbochin was simply too familiar with it. This thing existed in the beast park. It wasn't a rabbit, but a babe. It had a very ferocious temperament and was a type of ferocious beast that lived in groups. The fighting strength of the babe wasn't very strong, but its biggest characteristic was that no matter what it saw, whether it was a human or a saber-toothed tiger, it would charge forward and bite. At that time, Renbochin observed for a period of time and realized that this was indeed the case. Normally, animals wouldn't be as impulsive as the babe when they saw a huge creature. In Renbochin's memory, there was only one type of animal, and that was the big geese that were reared in the countryside. Due to the unique visual structure of geese, everything they saw was much smaller than it actually was. As a result, they dared to charge forward and peck at everything they saw. In the countryside, they were practically tyrants. Many children who grew up in the countryside had been bullied by those big white geese. When Renbochin was young, he would often go back to the countryside with his father to visit his grandfather. As a result, the first time he went back, he was chased by a big white goose for a few hundred meters. His entire body was pecked black and blue. From then on, whenever he saw a big goose, he would take a detour. Later on, when his younger brother grew a little older and brought him back to the countryside, Renbochin intentionally encouraged his younger brother to look at those big geese. The outcome was obvious. The fighting strength of the big geese was off the charts. In the end, his younger brother came back crying. This kind of babe gave him the same feeling. Even though he didn't know if his suspicion was correct, Renbochin still didn't have a trace of hesitation. He raised his hand and shot an arrow at it. The babe leaped forward and that arrow immediately left a bloody scar on its head. Even one of its ears was grazed by the arrow. Immediately, it pounced towards Renbochin crazily. An injured wild beast was the hardest to deal with. This saying wasn't wrong at all. Looking at the babe pouncing towards him, Renbochin didn't even have time to reload another arrow. He immediately used the crossbow to block the head of the babe. This thing's body size was similar to that of a dog. It was quite strong and almost pounced on Renbochin. Renbochin had to press down to block the sharp teeth of the babe. The head of the babe was still trying its best to stretch forward, wanting to bite off a piece of flesh from Renbochin's body. Its claws also scratched Renbochin's chest, immediately tearing his clothes. Fortunately, the bulletproof vest was effective. Renbochin cursed. He took out the pistol from his waist and fired 2 shots at the babe. 2 drops of blood appeared on the body of the babe. Only then did it wail and fall to the ground. Renbochin didn't dare to hesitate. He immediately turned around and ran. This thing lived in groups. If he killed one and another group of them came out, he reckoned that he would be in trouble. However, the more one was afraid of something, the more likely it would happen. A sound that sounded like a cat's meowing could be heard from behind him. As Renbochin ran back, he searched all over the place. After running back for a while, he finally found a tree that seemed to be of a suitable thickness and height. There weren't any dangerous vines on the tree as well. He carried the crossbow on his back and immediately climbed up the tree. At the same time, 5 or 6 white figures appeared not far behind him. They were meowing like cats and were drooling as they pounced towards Renbochin's direction as if they had rabies. Not long after Renbochin left, a very young imperial guard entered the carriage. He knelt on one knee and greeted, "Your Majesty." "Wu Fong, go to the forest and look after storyteller Ren. As long as he doesn't die, you don't have to make a move. If he really encounters any danger, save him and don't let him discover you. If he is hiding somewhere, think of a way to get him out." The Empress gently swirled her wine cup as she spoke. Qing Yuan and Hong Wuan looked at each other and revealed smiles on their faces. Her Majesty's intention was already very clear. Regardless of whether Renbochin taught Du Chongkong to say those words, he was still a suspect. Her Majesty was also too lazy to seek evidence. Did Her Majesty need evidence to do anything? Her Majesty's thoughts were very simple. She definitely wouldn't let you die, but she couldn't let you hide in one place obediently and comfortably either. She had to teach you a lesson. However, Her Majesty was really giving preferential treatment to that person. In these few years, this was the first time they saw Her Majesty paying so much attention to someone. If it was someone else, they would have either been beheaded or sent to the border army. Chapter 100. Ah! Renbochin, who was climbing up the tree, cried out in pain. After the babyists pounced on the tree, they used the tree trunk as leverage and scurried up. Even though Renbochin had already climbed more than 2 meters high, his buttocks were still scratched by their claws. Renbochin made use of a relatively thick branch above him and flipped himself up. Those babyists were still trying their best to jump up. The only good news was that babyists couldn't climb trees. Even though they could use the tree trunk to jump higher, they couldn't reach Renbochin, who was more than 3 meters above the ground. Renbochin, who was riding on the tree trunk, felt a burning pain in his buttocks. "Damn it, I was almost F***ed. Renbochin cursed. He looked at the babyists below him as if they had stolen his wife. "Now that you can't reach me, it's your turn to be unlucky." Renbochin took the crossbow from his back and loaded it with an arrow. He aimed down and pulled the trigger. Following a blood-curdling scream, the body of one of the babyists was penetrated by the crossbow arrow. The death of the babyists made the others even more furious. One by one, they stood up and clung onto the tree trunk, but they couldn't climb up no matter how hard they tried. "Bastards, don't you dare leave." Renbochin grimaced in pain as he aimed at the babyists one by one. "How dare they touch my buttocks? I have to take revenge. Do they really think my buttocks are so easy to touch?" When he killed the 3rd babyists, the remaining 3 babyists finally had the intention to retreat. They bared their teeth at Renbochin before running back to where they came from. Renbochin raised his crossbow and took aim for a while before shooting another arrow. This time, the arrow hit the leg of a babe beast. That babe beast howled miserably as it limped and disappeared from sight with the crossbow in tow. After the babyists left, Renbochin heaved a sigh of relief. He touched his buttocks. His hand was bleeding and it was extremely painful. He didn't even dare to sit down and could only sit on the tree branch with the other half of his buttocks. Climbing trees was indeed an essential skill for surviving in the wild. Fortunately, he often visited his grandfather in the countryside with his father. He also stole bird eggs and developed a strong tree climbing skill. Otherwise, even if he had a gun, he wouldn't be able to survive against the 6 baby asps. Even if he could keep his life, he would be injured all over, and it wouldn't just be a small injury to his butt. After the baby asps left, Renbochin wasn't in a hurry to get down from the tree. He pondered in his heart, it seems that the smell of blood can attract beasts, right? Why don't I cut open those baby asps and bleed them to see if I can attract some animals over? In any case, he didn't know where to look for that bay. It would be best if it attracted them, but if it didn't, he would just have to stay on the tree until noon tomorrow. It was safer than running around. The more Renbochin thought about it, the more he felt that it was a good idea. If that was the case, it wouldn't be difficult to endure until noon tomorrow. As long as he could attract some animals, he could kill 2 of them. Even if he couldn't kill the bay, he could still report back. At this time, he was immersed in the joy of finding a way to easily endure until tomorrow. His butt did not feel so painful anymore, and there was a smile on his face. He felt refreshed, and he was just short of singing majestic. Let out the blood of those baby asps first and retrieve the crossbow bolts. Renbochin made up his mind and slipped down from the tree. One by one, he dragged the baby asps' corpses to a place slightly further away. Following which, he plucked out the crossbow bolts and placed them back into the quiver without wiping them. Next, he took out his military knife and cut open the baby asps' stomachs one by one, allowing the smell of blood to be even stronger. After he was done, Renbochin crawled back to the path he came from. He first climbed up to a height of about 4 meters. He felt that it wasn't very comfortable there as the tree branches were thinner. Hence, he climbed back to his original position. The next step was to wait and see if any fish would take the bait. Taking advantage of this time, he tore a piece of cloth from his clothes and bandaged the wound on his butt. He had to admit that it wasn't easy to bandage this area. Every time he touched it, he would feel a sharp pain. After Renbochin bandaged the wound with great difficulty, no fish took the bait. However, he heard someone screaming in pain from afar. Which unlucky fellow is that? Renbochin gloated. It definitely wasn't an aboriginal. It should be one of those Saiyans. However, they only brought along a follower. Furthermore, they were still in the periphery. There shouldn't be any powerful beasts. So powerful. He has been shouting for 2 minutes without taking a breath. He's even more powerful than Luciano Pavarotti. Renbochin muttered to himself while frowning. This was because the sound seemed to be coming from his direction from afar. Furthermore, it wasn't slow. When he first heard the sound, he estimated that it was about 200 to 300 meters away from him. Now, it was less than 100 meters away. Furthermore, it wasn't just that person's scream. There was also the sound of a relatively large object colliding in the forest and the sound of a tree trunk collapsing. Boom! When that figure appeared in front of Renbochin, a tree that wasn't considered very thick was knocked down. Following which, a giant wild boar that was at least 2 meters tall appeared in front of Renbochin. Its fangs were more than half a meter long and looked like 2 long swords that were stuck in its mouth. It stared at Ning Kai-chin as it charged forward. Such a big wild boar. Is this a boar-shaped tank? Renbochin was shocked by the size of the wild boar. Wild boars were considered rather troublesome to deal with in the mountains, especially adult male wild boars. Even tigers wouldn't easily provoke them. Wild boars had thick skin and a thick layer of fat. It was very difficult for ordinary predators to cause fatal damage to wild boars with their teeth. Instead, their intestines would be sliced out by the other party's fangs. The old people often said, 1 wild boar, 2 tigers, and 3 bears. Those big wild boars that weighed 600 to 700 kilograms were as lethal as tigers and other ferocious beasts. Needless to say, the one in front of him was at least 2 meters above the ground. It was simply like a bulldozer. When it ran, the ground shook. Renbochin could feel it even from the tree trunk. Renbochin reckoned that his pistol wouldn't be able to cause much damage to this wild boar's skin and fat layer unless he hit a vital point such as its eyes. The person who was being chased by the wild boar and screaming was a familiar person, Ning Kaichin. He was walking in an S-shaped pattern while screaming like a pig being slaughtered. He had to admit that he was too daring to provoke such a fellow after entering the forest alone. An ordinary person wouldn't be able to avoid such a big wild boar in time. Renbochin only took a glance and heaved a sigh of relief. He held his breath and even shifted his gaze to other places. He only paid attention to the direction in which the wild boar and Ning Kaichin were running from the corner of his eyes. This was to prevent himself from being detected by the other party. However, what made Renbochin want to curse was that after Ning Kaichin made an S-shaped turn, he was running in the direction of him. Chapter 101. Just when Renbochin was hesitating whether he should jump down and run in another direction or stay here and try his luck, Ning Kaichin saw a few babe beast corpses on the ground. He raised his head and looked around. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and he waved his hand at Renbochin. Renbochin's position was easily recognizable. "What the hell are you waving at?" Renbochin cursed in his heart and pointed to the side. At the same time, he pointed his crossbow at Ning Kaichin. His meaning was clear. "Run in that direction and don't mess with me." Ning Kaichin was very tactful. When he saw Renbochin's hand gesture, he shouted, "Oh! Help!" She made a turn and passed by a tree that wasn't far from where Renbochin was hiding. That bulldozer-like wild boar also ran past the tree by a hair's breadth. Phew! Renbochin heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Ning Kaichin didn't drag him down with him. Otherwise, he would have shot him with the crossbow. Such a huge wild boar could probably be the king of this forest. "Ning Kaichin, you are very loyal this time. I will burn incense for you. Have a safe journey." Renbochin expressed his gratitude sincerely. After the movements of Ning Kaichin and the wild boar were far away, Renbochin continued to sit on the tree. This nearby tree was the most suitable. Since the wild boar had been lured away, there was no need for him to change his location. Not long after, silhouettes began to appear in the surroundings. They were all fox-like creatures. They looked greedily at the babe beast corpses on the ground. However, they didn't rush over. Instead, they circled around the area to see if there was any danger. "These things aren't prepared for you guys." Renbochin spoke softly and shot an arrow at one of the foxes. However, the arrow was slightly off. That fox was immediately frightened and all its fur stood up. After looking around, it turned into the forest. The other foxes circled around. They couldn't bear to leave, but they didn't dare to go near. Renbochin shot another arrow and pierced through another fox. The other foxes immediately turned into the forest and disappeared without a trace. After doing this, Renbochin continued to wait. Since he had nothing to do, he checked his waist bag and found a plastic bottle. Only then did he remember that he had brought anesthetic with him. Just now, he was so nervous that he had forgotten about it. However, it would not be easy to knock out such a huge wild boar with anesthetic. However, he still soaked the front end of the crossbow bolt in the bottle and only took it out after more than 10 seconds. After waiting for a while, she suddenly heard the sound of footsteps. She turned her head and looked in the direction of the sound. To her surprise, it was Ning Kaichen again. She didn't know where he had left the wild boar behind him. Ning Kaichen climbed up the tree in a few steps. His movements were very accurate. It seemed like he had done a lot of climbing trees to get bird eggs. Covered in dirt, he crawled to Renbachian's side and sat down. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and said, "You scared me to death just now. They almost caught up to me. Luckily, I ran fast." "You actually got rid of him. How did you offend him?" Renbachian asked. As long as Ning Kaichen could get rid of the wild boar, he did not mind having a companion. In fact, it was quite boring to stay on the tree alone. Upon hearing Renbachian's question, Ning Kaichen was at a loss. "I don't know either. I was walking in the forest when that guy suddenly rushed out as if he had killed his father. Fortunately, we managed to shake them off." "Are you alone?" Renbachian asked again. "I heard that the beasts in the mountains and forests of Dayo are different from those in Great Xia. I just came up to take a look and didn't think of any rewards." Ning Kaichen smiled embarrassedly. Ning Kaichen was also a travel enthusiast. From this point of view, he was quite daring. "Let's stay here first. It's safer than going down there," Renbachian said. After finishing his sentence, he pricked up his ears and listened carefully. "Did you hear anything?" Ning Kaichen listened attentively as well. Soon after, his gaze froze. Boom! Both of them heard the sound of a tree crashing to the ground. Following which, they saw a huge figure sniffing the ground. It raised its head and stared fixedly in the direction of Renbachian and Ning Kaichen before charging over. "Damn it!" Renbachian cursed. It was unknown whether he was cursing Ning Kaichen or the wild boar. He immediately jumped to the ground, rolled on the ground, and ran away with all his might. "It will chase after you. You better stay away from me." Renbachian didn't forget to shout. He immediately dived into the forest and ran for quite a distance. When he realized that Ning Kaichen and the huge wild boar weren't running in his direction, he slowed down his pace. His lungs were burning. He recovered as he walked. He didn't want to know how the wild boar targeted Ning Kaichen. He just wanted to find a suitable tree to climb and rest on. No matter what, it was safer to stay on a tree. Renbachian felt himself getting more and more tired. Now that he was going uphill, running was tiring. Now that the danger was temporarily resolved and the wild boar was chasing after Ning Kaichen, Renbachian stopped and leaned against a tree to rest. "Hey, isn't this Deputy Ren?" Just as Renbachian stopped and leaned against the tree, two people appeared from behind the tree in front of him. Renbachian felt that the voice was familiar. He looked up and recognized the person. It was Lian Baoqing, the brain-damaged second generation. He was wearing a brocade robe. In front of him was the guard who used a knife to stop Mr. Emptiness from spitting out a mouthful of blood. "What AF** king coincidence," Renbachian said unhappily, but his heart was in his throat. In such a big forest, he actually met two groups of people coincidentally. He didn't know if he was unlucky or something else. Renbachian didn't know what happened to Ning Kaichen, but to meet Lian Baoqing twice in a row, it wasn't just a coincidence. Why did he meet both groups of people in such a big forest? Previously, it was fine for him to hide in the tree. However, after meeting Ning Kaichen, that jinx, he met Lian Baoqing nearby. Renbachian felt that this wasn't just a coincidence. Whether it was a coincidence or not, Renbachian didn't feel that he was a match for the guard in front of him. The speed of the blood arrow shot by Mr. Emptiness wasn't slow compared to the speed of the crossbow arrow, but it was stopped by the other party's knife. From this, one could see the strength of the guard. It's indeed a coincidence. Meeting Deputy Ren in the wilderness really makes me feel gratified, Lian Baoqing said maliciously. Renbochin naturally knew that he had offended Lian Baoqing badly. At this moment, when he heard what Lian Baoqing said, a bad feeling arose in his heart. While panting, he pointed the crossbow arrow at Lian Baoqing and said, "You miss me so much? What do you miss me about? Tell me, I'm listening." Lian Baoqing's gaze wandered in all directions. After looking around carefully, he smiled at Renbochin and said, "Of course I miss you to die. Her Majesty is at the foot of the mountain. You dare to touch me?" Renbochin said coldly. "It's hard to say what happens in this forest, right? It doesn't seem surprising that you died here. As long as we dig a hole, we won't even find your corpse. Who would know how you died?" Lian Baoqing had a crazy look on his face. "I have never been humiliated like this in my life. If you stayed in Lawn City and didn't come out, I wouldn't have any good ideas. Since you came here, you can't blame others. You can only blame yourself for being too reckless." Chapter 102. What do you want? As long as I can do it, I will promise you anything. Renbochin took a step back and looked a little flustered. He didn't dare to fire the crossbow in his hand. Because he only had one arrow, if he missed, he wouldn't even have the last thing that could threaten or harm his opponent. "I'm happy to see you die." Lian Baoqing had a mocking look on his face. From his point of view, Renbochin was like a rabbit that had been cornered into a corner. Although he still had a crossbow in his hand, it posed almost no threat to him. Renbochin clenched his teeth and shot an arrow at the guard. Even though Lian Baoqing was the mastermind, the bodyguard was the knife. Even if Renbochin killed Lian Baoqing, the bodyguard could still kill Renbochin. Not to mention, he might not even be able to kill it. Clang! The steel saber in the guard's hand drew a white light, and the crossbow bolt was immediately deflected. Seeing this, Renbochin became even more flustered. "I can use something to exchange for my life," Renbochin shouted. "I'm not interested in your things. I'm more interested in your life." Lian Baoqing had a complacent smile on his face. He was not in a hurry to kill Renbochin. Instead, he was more interested in Renbochin's terrified expression. He enjoyed seeing a person who was originally a tyrant make such an expression in front of him. "Don't you think that I look very similar to the seventh prince?" Renbochin shouted anxiously. "I know the secret of the seventh prince's identity. I will use this secret to exchange for my life. You can use this secret to obtain countless benefits." "He will promise you anything," Renbochin shouted anxiously. "Yen Wei." Lian Baoqing's expression froze when he heard this. He stopped Yen Wei from moving forward. At this moment, Yen Wei was less than 10 steps away from Renbochin. "Tell me everything you know," Lian Baoqing said sternly. In his heart, he was thinking, could it be that the seventh prince is not the emperor's biological son? Impossible, how could such a thing happen? However, Renbochin looked exactly the same. He hadn't seen the seventh prince before, but 2 days ago, he paid a visit to the seventh prince. When he saw the seventh prince's face, his heart was filled with shock. After hearing Renbochin's words, he started to mutter to himself. Could it be that the seventh prince was a twin, and one of them was wandering outside? If that was the case, Renbochin wouldn't be able to live. "You have to promise to let me leave this place." Renbochin panted loudly. He looked very nervous. "If what you say is of any value, then I will. But you have no choice." Renbochin. "Now, there are only the 3 of us here. You have no other chance," Lian Baoqing said as he looked at Renbochin. Renbochin looked at Lian Baoqing and Yen Wei, who was 10 steps away. "If you want to not say it, you want to die." "The seventh prince isn't the son of Great Xiao's emperor," Renbochin gritted his teeth and said. Nonsense. How is that possible? When Lian Baoqing heard this, he could no longer maintain his composure. His face was filled with shock. Ren. Say. Ren. As Renbochin spoke, he threw the crossbow on the ground and took out a dark green elliptical sphere with a black cover from his waist. He held it in his right hand and said, "The evidence is in here. I will give it to you, and you will let me leave. If you don't promise me, I will destroy it." Renbochin threw the crossbow on the ground. As Renbochin spoke, cold sweat broke out on his forehead. When the other party saw his expression, they thought that he was afraid. Indeed, he was afraid, but he was afraid that the thing in his hand would suddenly explode. Although it would not explode if the safety clip was pressed, he was still afraid. If anything happened, he would be smashed to pieces. Lian Baoqing looked at Renbochin and laughed. Yan Wei is within 10 steps of you. Do you think you have the chance to destroy it? Renbochin's face changed. Do you think it's so easy to get your hands on this? I can tell you that there are 2 layers. The innermost layer is the evidence, and the outermost layer is strong acid. If I fall on the ground, the acid will destroy the innermost layer. You can choose. Do you want to kill me, or do you want to keep this secret? After hearing what Renbochin said, Lian Baoqing pondered for a while, then nodded his head and said, "All right, I promise you. Give me the things and I will let you go." Renbochin said, "Swear that you will let me go and not lay a finger on me for a day." Lian Baoqing smiled and said, "Okay, I promise you." On a tree not far away from the 2 of them, a man looked at the scene below and hesitated. He didn't know if he should snatch the thing from Lian Baoqing. This secret should be handed over to Her Majesty. Judging from the man's expression, it was obvious that he didn't take his promise seriously. He knew that as long as storyteller Ren handed the thing over, the other party would kill him immediately. This storyteller Ren was too stupid to actually expose such a secret. No matter who the other party was, they wouldn't let him leave alive. This secret was too important. Renbochin clenched his teeth. He suddenly raised his hand and threw the green ball at Lian Baoqing. Then, he turned around and ran. Yan Wei jumped up and grabbed the green ball. He sneered. "Do you think you can run away? Give me the thing and kill him." Lian Baoqing was ecstatic. If what Renbochin said was true, even if he killed an earth will expert, he would be able to explain himself when he returned. However, at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared and pounced toward Yan Wei. No matter what, he had to snatch the evidence first. This was too important, even if he had to expose himself. Renbochin, who turned around and ran, also paid attention to his back. At the same time, he counted in his heart, 1, 2, 3. Then, he threw himself forward. Yan Wei had just received the green ball when he had a bad feeling. At the same time, he realized that someone was pouncing toward him from the forest. He turned his body slightly and pointed the long saber in his hand at the other party. "Who's there?" Boom! The green ball in Yan Wei's hand suddenly exploded. A huge flame and airflow spread out from a point with countless fragments. Yan Wei was sent flying by the huge explosion. At the same time, his left hand disappeared. At the same time, countless fragments hit his body. His whole body was like a broken puppet, and there wasn't any sound at all. His entire upper body was missing like a broken doll. Even half of his head was missing. Lian Baoqing was shocked by the explosion and the loud sound. He subconsciously covered his head with both hands and sat on the ground. That black figure forcefully twisted its body in the air, stepped on a tree trunk beside Lian Wei, and flew sideways. A few seconds later, it disappeared into the shade. After confirming that he was out of sight, Wu Fang checked his body. Even though the explosion was relatively far away from him, it still affected him. There were a few metal fragments on his body. Those fragments were too fast and too close to him. He couldn't dodge them in time. Fortunately, they only pierced into his skin and weren't very deep. Liar. Wu Fang gritted his teeth. He pulled out the two biggest shrapnel from his body and tore a few strips of cloth to bandage his wounds. If he still didn't know that Rinpoche was a complete liar, he would be a fool. Previously, he thought that Rinpoche was stupid. Now, he felt that he was stupid. He was angry that he was cheated. Chapter 103. Rinpoche clenched his teeth as he passed through the smoke. His gaze swept across Yan Wei's tattered body and immediately felt a little nauseous. However, most of his attention was on Lian Baoqing, who was sitting there in a daze. Lian Baoqing couldn't figure out what had just happened. How did that green sphere suddenly explode into countless fragments, along with that huge sound wave and a ball of flame? How did his guard leader die just like that? Even though Yan Wei had just attained the earth will level, he could be considered a small expert. Even though the Lian family wasn't considered the top in Great Xia, they were considered outstanding among the second-rate families. There were only 6 earth will experts in the family. The practitioners in Great Xia were divided into the spirit will level, also known as the wisdom palace. Next was the heaven will level, also known as the path to heaven. Below that was the earth will level, also known as the earth embryo level. Below that was the man will level. Most practitioners couldn't even attain the man will level. Only 1 out of 100 practitioners could attain the man will level and truly control the body. Only 1 out of 1,000 man will practitioners could attain the earth will level. It could be said that this was 1 in 100,000 practitioners. Even those who had just attained the earth will level could obtain the position of a deputy general in the army. Those who reached the peak of the earth will level could be considered experts. Only those who reached the peak of the earth will level could be called the earth embryo level and could borrow the power of the earth. As long as they stood on the ground, they could absorb the earth's energy to restore their physical strength. Having 1 foot in the earth will level meant that they had the potential to attain the earth embryo level. If they were lucky, they could even break through the heavenly gate and step onto the path to heaven. Such people would be valued everywhere. The Lian family had spent countless efforts over the years to nurture and recruit 6 earth will experts, which was enough to show how precious they were. He had always been favored by his father. Furthermore, he came to Dao, so he was paired with 2 experts who had just attained the earth will level. One was Lian Baoqing and the other was Yan Wei. A few days ago, Lian Baoqian was ordered to be trampled to death by that mad dog. Even if he was favored by his father, he wouldn't be able to escape punishment. As a result, he hated Rinpoche to death and wished he could skin him and eat his flesh. On one hand, he was humiliated, and on the other hand, it was because of this. After confirming the direction of Rinpoche, Lian Baoqian and Yan Wei returned in this direction. He was originally looking for Deputy Ren, but he didn't expect Rinpoche to appear in front of him as if he was being chased by a dog. This almost made him burst into laughter. There was a path to heaven, but you didn't take it. Instead, you barged into hell. I was looking for you, and you came running in front of me. However, what happened next took a sudden turn. Yan Wei died just like that. Lian Baoqing's eyes were filled with fear and sluggishness. The fear was because of what had just happened, and the sluggishness was because of Yan Wei's corpse. He hadn't even seen the Empress, and 2 earth will experts were already dead. When he returned, he would definitely be punished according to the family rules. Thinking of his own ending made him tremble all over. Rinpoche held the gun and walked to within 10 meters of Lian Baoqing. He pointed the gun at Lian Baoqing and took a deep breath. Lian Baoqing recovered from his daze and saw Rinpoche, who wasn't far from him, raising his hand and pointing the black object at him. What was that? Lian Baoqing didn't think too much about it. He was about to go crazy. Are you lying to me? Lian Baoqing looked at Rinpochen with reddened eyes. He still had a glimmer of hope in his heart that what Rinpochen said was true. If that was the case, he would still be able to explain himself when he returned. He was like a drowning man who would not let go of anything he could grab onto. Isn't this nonsense? Lian Baoqing stared at Rinpochen as if he had a rabid dog. I will kill you and bury you with him. He pounced on Rinpochen ferociously. Even though his martial arts weren't very good, he had practiced for a few days when he was young. He hadn't even reached the threshold of the man-will level. However, everyone could see that Rinpochen didn't know any martial arts at all. Therefore, the only thought in Lian Baoqing's mind right now was to kill this bastard who caused him to end up like this. No matter what, he had to kill him. He also believed that he would definitely be able to kill Yan Wei. If Yan Wei was like this, Rinpochen would still be a little worried. This was also the reason why he didn't dare to take out his gun. If he couldn't kill Yan Wei, he would be dead meat. But now, facing Lian Baoqing, he didn't have to worry at all. Rinpochen looked at Lian Baoqing as if he was looking at a fool. His fingers slightly trembled as he pulled the trigger. Bang! 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 3 crisp but soft gunshots were heard. It wasn't like the sound of a silencer installed on a TV or in a game. Rinpochen only knew this when he was practicing at the shooting range. The sound of a silencer could only reduce the sound of gunshots, but it was still a bang or a toot sound. Following the 3 gunshots, Lian Baoqing froze on the spot. He raised his arm and touched his chest. All the strength in his body gradually disappeared. The expression on his face changed from anger to incredulity and fear. What exactly was in his opponent's hand? Plop! Lian Baoqing fell to the ground. He could only breathe in and not out. Just now, a shot had hit his lung, and blood was spurting out of his mouth. Rinpochen went behind him, aimed at Lian Baoqing's back, and fired another shot. Only then did he feel more at ease. This wasn't the first time he put someone to death. He had already taken a few lives under his orders, but today was the first time he killed someone with his own hands. In particular, Lian Baoqing was killed by him, which made him feel somewhat uncomfortable. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. However, the tightness in his heart was still there. Wu Fang, who was hiding under the shade of a tree, squinted his eyes. Why did this storyteller Ren have so many strange things on him? Initially, he didn't know why Her Majesty was so interested in a foreigner. Now, he more or less understood. Rinpochen sat on the ground. Just now, he didn't seem to have done much, but he was really nervous. He didn't have any confidence in facing Yan Wei with a gun. In the end, he told a big lie and threw a grenade at Yan Wei. If he failed, he would probably have to draw his gun and fight it out with Yan Wei. However, he didn't have any confidence in winning. Even a crossbow arrow could be blocked by a knife. Could a gun really deal with it? Fortunately, Lian Baoqing was from Great Xia. The lie that the 7th prince wasn't the biological son of the emperor had indeed attracted the attention of Yan Wei and caused him to have all sorts of greedy thoughts. Now, he had one. All the strength in his body was gone. After sitting on the ground for a few minutes, Rinpochen thought about the 2 corpses. The explosion of the grenade just now wasn't soft. He was afraid that it would attract people. If no one came, the corpses of the 2 would be eaten by wild beasts in no time. Unfortunately, the explosion just now was too loud. Even though it wasn't easy to meet people in this forest, there were still many people in the surroundings. In particular, such an explosion would probably attract many people's attention. Presumably, people would come soon. There wasn't enough time for him to move the corpses away. Renbochin didn't dare to delay any longer. He got up to pick up the crossbow and carried it on his back. Then, he went to look for Yan Wei's knife. When he came back, he slashed Yan Wei's body a few times until the corpse was beyond recognition. Even though he couldn't tell how Yan Wei died since the people in this world didn't know about grenades, he still did it. Only then did he feel a little more at ease. After all, he was just an ordinary person previously. He didn't know how to destroy corpses and didn't have the time to do so. He could only do as much damage as he wanted. He endured the disgust and cut open Lian Baoqing's abdomen to look for the bullet in his stomach. However, as he searched, his stomach turned upwards until it reached his throat before he could push it back down. Renbochin really didn't dare to think about anything else. It was too disgusting. He was afraid that he would vomit now. The 9mm bullet he used had a strong stopping effect, but its penetrative ability was average. Even at a distance of 10 meters, it might not be able to penetrate a human body. Finally, he found 2 bullets in Lian Baoqing's stomach. One bullet was fired from his chest when he stepped on Lian Baoqing's back. He couldn't find the last bullet. After doing all this, Renbochin cut off half of Lian Baoqing's neck. He didn't dare to delay any longer. He looked around and couldn't find the crossbow arrow. After he was far away, he couldn't help but bend over and vomit. Ordering others to kill, personally using a gun to kill, and finally cutting open the other party's abdomen to look for bullets were 2 completely different things. Just now, Renbochin almost couldn't hold it in anymore, but he forcefully endured it. At this moment, he vomited out everything in his stomach. After vomiting stomach acid for a long time, he gulped down a few mouthfuls of water to recover his strength. Then, he walked away again. He didn't walk far before he heard the sound of a stream. He followed the sound. The stream wasn't big, and it was so clear that he could see the bottom. He could see a few fish swimming in it. After Renbochin confirmed that there was no danger, he splashed a lot of cold water on his face. This made him feel much better. Then, he slowly cleaned the bloodstains on his hands. Chapter 104. He washed his hands clean and didn't pay much attention to the bloodstains on his body. There wasn't a lot of blood. When he was doing other things, Lian Baoqing was already dead and his heart had stopped beating. Therefore, he didn't spit out much blood. Most of the blood was on his hands. There were also some other bloodstains. After all, he had a wound on his buttocks. It wouldn't make sense to say that it was smeared on his hands. Renbochin filled his water bag with water. The stream water in this world was relatively clean. Of course, he couldn't do anything if it wasn't clean. After that, he went back along the original path. He wanted to see who found the corpses and what conclusions they would draw. It was impossible to find him in a short period of time. After all, he wasn't strong enough to kill people. The others had never seen a gun or a grenade before. He wouldn't use a grenade unless he had no other choice. As for the gun, it would be fine as long as he didn't find the missing bullet. The wounds had already been damaged by him. Renbochin had already tried his best to hide himself, and he couldn't do any more than that. If he had enough time, he would rather hide the 2 corpses. After a day, they would be eaten by wild beasts and no clues would be found. Renbochin thought it would be easy to find his way back. However, he couldn't find his way back even after walking for a long time. When he was running, he didn't pay attention to the surrounding scenery. This forest was huge. He almost got bitten by a snake before he could find his way back. It was easy for him to go down the mountain. However, it would be difficult for him to find a place in the forest. After going around in circles, Renbochin found his way back to the stream. He looked down at the soil beside the stream and searched from bottom to top. Many animals would come to the stream to drink water. In particular, places with many animals would leave footprints. This was common knowledge. Renbochin found a place with many paw prints. He wasn't sure if it was left by a wolf or a feline. He found a suitable tree nearby and climbed it. Now, he just had to wait for those animals to come to drink water. If he was lucky and encountered a bay, he could go down the mountain. In any case, Renbochin was trying his luck. It would be great if he could encounter one. If he didn't, he wouldn't be allowed to go down the tree. He would wait until tomorrow morning. After staying in the tree for a while, Renbochin thought of something. There was a small bottle in his bag. It was given to him by Tai Dao in the morning. It was said to be able to attract wild beasts within a certain range. If he threw this thing out, would it attract the mountain wolves and the bay? However, Renbochin hesitated for a while before putting the bottle back into his waist pouch. This thing was too risky. If it attracted wild beasts like the wild boar, it would be his turn to be unlucky. Renbochin stayed in the tree. Not far away, Wufang was hesitating whether he should think of a way to chase Renbochin down from the tree. The Empress had instructed Renbochin to make him move if he were to find a place to hide. However, Renbochin's current position was overlooking the river, and it could be said that he was preparing to hunt. This made Renbochin somewhat uncertain. He subconsciously touched his chest and arms. The wounds on his body made him make up his mind. At this moment, his ears suddenly twitched, and he concealed his aura. The sound of footsteps could be heard nearby, and it wasn't just one. After a while, Renbochin heard the sound of someone walking in the forest. He held his breath. In a minute or two the two men came out of the woods to the river. A man and a woman. They were aboriginals. The man walked around the riverside and nodded. "This is it. Let's wait here. We should be able to gain something." "You're not going deeper?" the woman asked. "I can't snatch it from them, so I won't waste my energy. Furthermore, I saw traces left behind by a black fatty nearby. It looks like it's not small, so it's reasonable if we manage to hunt it," the man said. Both of them were about 16 or 17 years old. The man was tall and carried a pair of hammers in his hands. In other words, 2 iron blocks that were the size of cantaloupes were equipped with handles. The woman was full of heroic spirit. She carried a longbow on her back and a dagger on her waist. Renbochin was slightly stunned when he heard their conversation. There were actually people who thought highly of this place like him. However, after thinking about it, it was normal. He had learned this knowledge from television. And these aboriginals were much better at hunting than him. It was impossible that they didn't know about it. However, what kind of animal was the black fatty that they were talking about? According to the man's tone, it should be another name for a rather powerful wild beast. It seemed like the two of them had the same idea. Should he show himself? Renbochin thought again. He couldn't possibly keep hiding here, right? If he was discovered by the other party sooner or later, he might as well greet them first. Furthermore, it definitely wouldn't be dangerous to meet aboriginals. When Renbochin thought of this, he called out softly, "The two of you. Who's there?" The two of them turned around abruptly. "It's you." After seeing Renbochin, the two of them spoke in unison. "I have been here for a while. When I saw the two of you coming over, I felt that I should greet you," Renbochin said. "Since you were here first, let's change places," the man immediately said. "You don't have to change places. I only want a bay. The rest are yours," Renbochin immediately said. He actually hoped that the two of them would stay here. That way, he would be much safer. As he spoke, he slid down from the tree and walked to the two of them. Only then did he realize that the two of them looked very similar. It seemed like they were brother and sister. The two of you. Renbochin nodded at them. The two of them first looked at the crossbow in Renbochin's hands before asking, "What's a bay?" "It's a wolf with short front legs in a wolf pack. It's different from ordinary wolves," Renbochin explained. He had only heard of the word bay before. He didn't know what it looked like exactly. It should be a wolf with short legs. The woman suddenly understood. There are wolf footprints here. However, short-legged wolves are rare. We might not meet them. It doesn't matter. It's best if we can meet them. It doesn't matter if we don't. It's fate that we met in this forest. Let's team up, Renbochin said. The two of them didn't mind Renbochin's suggestion. Anyway, Renbochin didn't want other animals. The two of them only wanted to get something to report back. If he could hit that black fatty, that would naturally be the best. "How do I address the two of you?" Renbochin asked again. "Quan Yonglin. Quan Yongha." The two of them said. The man was Quan Yonglin and the woman was Quan Yongha. Renbochin. "I know you, Deputy Ren. I met you this afternoon. I heard Gujiu mention you before," Quan Yonglin said. His attitude was like he was talking to a stranger. He wasn't hostile, but he wasn't enthusiastic either. This was normal and Renbochin didn't mind. "What's the relationship between Gujiu and Gu Shaoqing?" Renbochin asked. Previously, he met Gu Shou. Without asking, he knew that he was Gu Daxiong's biological son. When the two of them mentioned Gujiu, Renbochin felt that he might be Gu Daxiong's nephew. He's Gu Shaoqing's second son. Quan Yonglin's words confirmed Renbochin's suspicions. After the two of them met, Renbochin asked again, "What are the two of you going to do? Are you going to wait here?" "The two of us will go to the other side of the river. If there's any prey that we fancy, we'll make our move," Quan Yonglin said. There was a big rock at the other side of the river. It was about 3 meters tall. It was a good place. Chapter 105. Renbochin walked to the bottom of the tree, but he wasn't in a hurry to climb it. He turned around and looked at the two of them. The two of them leaped over the 2-meter-wide stream and landed on top of the huge rock. Renbochin couldn't help but feel envious every time he saw their skills. Renbochin suppressed his envy when he thought that he would be able to exchange the martial arts manual with Du Changkong and practice it himself. Another thing that made Renbochin envious was that the space on top of the rock was very big and it was much more comfortable to stay there. However, it seemed that the two of them didn't really like him. Renbochin turned around and climbed the tree. Just as he turned around and was about to climb, he heard a hissing sound above his head. He looked up and saw a snake as thick as a bowl looking at him with its tongue sticking out. Renbochin was shocked when he suddenly saw a snake above his head. He had experienced a lot this afternoon and could more or less control his emotions. He took 2 steps back and when he raised his crossbow and was about to shoot, he realized that it wasn't just one snake. There were a few snakes crawling on top of the tree. The thick ones were as thick as a cup and the thin ones were as thick as 2 fingers. When he was on the tree just now, he didn't realize there were snakes nearby. However, a few minutes after he came down from the tree, they had already occupied his place. Renbochin took a few steps back and the snake no longer paid attention to him. However, Renbochin wasn't willing to let the nest that he had found be occupied just like that. This tree was the most suitable one in the vicinity. He raised his crossbow, aimed at the biggest snake and pulled the trigger. The biggest snake was immediately nailed to the tree trunk and twisted its body in pain. Another arrow was shot at the curled-up snake. The snake's head was raised high, as if it was struggling. Renbochin shot the next arrow at a snake not far away. The arrow penetrated the back of the snake's head and nailed it to the tree trunk. After nailing 2 snakes to the tree, the other snakes naturally felt the danger and started to crawl on the tree trunk. One of them swam to the ground and went into the forest. Renbochin looked at the few snakes that were scurrying around. He didn't make any more moves because he realized a problem. These snakes wouldn't die immediately after being nailed to the tree. The tree was only so big. With a few snakes nailed to it, he didn't dare to go up. Renbochin pondered for a moment. He turned his head and looked around to find a tree that he could hide behind. The tree couldn't be too short as it wouldn't be safe if it was too short. They couldn't be too tall or too thick, or they wouldn't be able to climb up. The view should be better. Of these conditions, the tree that had just been occupied was the one that was the most suitable. While Renbochin was looking around, he suddenly felt as if someone was looking at him from behind. He turned around abruptly and pointed his crossbow at the other party. In the next second, Renbochin's face turned pale as he turned around and ran. "Help!" Renbochin shouted like a little girl who was about to be molested to attract the attention of Quan Yonglin and Quan Yonghe. At the same time, he ran to the stream, jumped into it, and trudged to the other side. Following behind him was a saber-toothed tiger with brown fur and fine stripes. It looked at Renbochin with ridicule in its eyes as it walked out of the forest unhurriedly. Renbochin jumped into the stream and discovered a big problem. The depth of the water seemed to be knee-deep, but after a few steps, the water had already reached his waist. The amount of strength needed to walk forward was much more than he had expected. With great difficulty, he climbed up to the shore. That saber-toothed tiger had also reached the side of the stream. He reckoned that the saber-toothed tiger would be able to reach him with just a pounce from the distance of 2 meters. However, the saber-toothed tiger's gaze wasn't on Renbochin. Instead, it was looking at the top of the rock. It growled and slowly retreated. On the rock, Quan Yonglin didn't care about the saber-toothed tiger. However, Quan Yonghe drew his bow and aimed at it, making it feel threatened. Without waiting for the saber-toothed tiger to retreat, Quan Yonghe shot an arrow. In any case, Renbochin didn't see anything. That saber-toothed tiger let out a blood-curdling scream as the arrow pierced through its hind leg and pierced into the ground. Just now, when that arrow was shot, the saber-toothed tiger suddenly pounced forward. Otherwise, its back would have been pierced through. After suffering this injury, the saber-toothed tiger no longer retreated. With a furious roar, it ran to the side of the stream and pounced over. At this moment, the saber-toothed tiger's eyes were filled with madness and ruthlessness. Fortunately, he wasn't the saber-toothed tiger's target. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to run away. "Hey!" Quan Yonglin stood on the rock and laughed. He swung the 2 hammers that were the size of honeydew melons in his hands and leaped down. The 2 hammers carried an enormous power as they smashed towards the saber-toothed tiger's head. The saber-toothed tiger was originally prepared to pounce on the rock. After seeing Quan Yonglin's power, it immediately shifted its body to the side. Soon after, it opened its bloody mouth and bit towards Quan Yonglin's waist. Just by looking at its mouth of sharp teeth, one would know what would happen if one was bitten. At the same time, its pair of front claws slapped towards Quan Yonglin's body. This action was similar to a pounce. After running for more than 10 meters, Renbochin turned his head and saw this scene. He felt that if the saber-toothed tiger was facing him, he would definitely be dead meat. However, Quan Yonglin didn't panic in the slightest. He flipped his hand in mid-air and smashed the saber-toothed tiger's face with his hammer. Bang! The saber-toothed tiger let out a miserable howl. Normally, if such a big metal hammer were to smash the face, it would definitely be smashed into pieces. Furthermore, Renbochin understood the strength of the Aboriginals very well. He had seen the scene of a person being sent flying for 7 to 8 meters and even penetrating the wall with just a kick. It was even more impossible for a son of a high-ranking official like Quan Yonglin to be weak. However, what made him astonished was that the saber-toothed tiger actually only let out a miserable howl. A few of its teeth were knocked out. Following which, it became even more ferocious and smashed Quan Yonglin away. Was this saber-toothed tiger made of iron? Was this really a saber-toothed tiger? Wasn't it a Decepticon? Renbochin took in a breath of cold air when he saw this round of confrontation between the two of them. He was frightened. When this saber-toothed tiger was locked up in the beast park, he didn't think much of it. He didn't expect it to be so ferocious. Not to mention other things, its ability to withstand attacks was already somewhat terrifying. Quan Yonglin was sent flying and fell into the small stream. The saber-toothed tiger's eyes were bloodshot, filled with brutality and madness. Following that, it pounced over. Just as Quan Yonglin fell into the small stream, he kicked off the water with both of his legs. He raised his hammer high and smashed it towards the saber-toothed tiger once again. He gave off an indomitable feeling. Even if it was a mountain in front of him, he would still smash it violently. Bang! Quan Yonglin was sent flying again. The saber-toothed tiger also let out a miserable howl as it was smashed onto the ground. This time, the iron hammer directly smashed onto its head. The eye that was slightly injured just now was directly smashed into pieces. Now, both Quan Yonglin and the saber-toothed tiger's eyes were bloodshot. They pounced on each other again. The saber-toothed tiger was beaten crazy. It was truly crazy. As for Quan Yonglin, Renbochin felt that he might have sand in his eyes. You aren't even injured, why are your eyes so bloodshot? The two of them collided once again. However, the saber-toothed tiger suddenly turned around and whipped Quan Yonglin with its tail, sending him flying away. Its tailbone was also ruthlessly smashed by Quan Yonglin's hammer. It let out another miserable howl. Now, Renbochin didn't know who looked more like a wild beast, Quan Yonglin or this saber-toothed tiger. In any case, the feeling that Quan Yonglin gave Renbochin was, I don't care about dodging, tricks, or techniques. Don't be a coward. Just do it. Swing the hammer and smash. During the fourth confrontation, Quan Yonglin's two hammers whistled through the air and smashed onto the saber-toothed tiger's head. The saber-toothed tiger groaned before it was smashed back onto the ground again. Its body twitched slightly. It might have been smashed to death. At the very least, it had a severe concussion. It was reckoned that even a Decepticon would be crippled by these two hammers, let alone a saber-toothed tiger. Quan Yonglin flew out once again. After rolling on the ground, he leaped to the side of the saber-toothed tiger and smashed the saber-toothed tiger's head with his iron hammer. Bang! 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 Renbochin looked at Quan Yonglin as if he was forging iron. The ground was also trembling. Renbochin felt apprehensive. Chapter 106. Seeing Quan Yonglin's crazed look, Renbochin was alarmed and jumpy. On the other hand, Quan Yonghe, who was on the rock, acted as if he didn't see anything. After Quan Yonglin jumped down, he sat there in a daze. In the end, Quan Yonglin could no longer see anything on the ground except for a puddle of Lao Gan Ma. Quan Yonglin finally stopped, walked to the stream, and threw the hammer into the water. Then, he jumped in and washed the flesh off his body. After everything was done, he picked up the hammer and stood in the stream. He shouted at Quan Yonghe, "Let's go. The saber-toothed tiger is dead. The other animals will smell it from afar. They won't come anymore." Can you not make it so disgusting next time? Kwon Young-ha said with a look of disgust, but he still jumped down from the rock. Ha, this thing is quite strong. I couldn't hold back for a moment. Kwon Young-lin laughed. It's not that you can't hold back, right? I have never heard of anyone who can't hold back and still wants to whip a corpse and smash it into minced meat. Ren Bachin cursed in his heart. He stood far away and didn't say a word. I'm afraid there won't be any animals coming to this riverside today. You should go somewhere else, Kwon Young-lin shouted at Ren Bachin again. Ren Bachin nodded vigorously. In any case, he wouldn't get close to Kwon Young-lin anymore. Initially, the two of them looked quite good, but when they started fighting, it was too crazy. If others were by his side, they naturally wouldn't be afraid. But if they were to get too close, they would probably be killed by his hammer. Just now, with bloodshot eyes, Ren Bachin didn't dodge or evade the saber-toothed tiger's attack. He didn't even let the saber-toothed tiger off and even wanted to smash the saber-toothed tiger into minced meat. This really terrified Ren Bachin. Ren Bachin was a good citizen. Although his hands were stained with 2 lives, he was still a good citizen. Ren Bachin's weak body didn't dare to get too close to such a person. After the two of them left, Ren Bachin sat on the ground and thought about it. He felt that he had been cheated. Initially, he was having a good time here. However, his old nest was occupied and they even killed a saber-toothed tiger. Judging from what they said, the other animals probably wouldn't dare to come here today. If he wanted to hunt, he would have to find another place. It had always been dangerous for him to wander around in this forest. After pondering for a while, he felt that it was better for him to stay here. His goal wasn't to hunt, but to find a place to stay. It didn't matter even if he had to stay out all night, as long as he could return safely. As for hunting, whoever wanted to do it could do it. After watching the battle just now, Ren Bachin had a deeper understanding of how dangerous this forest was. Just like the saber-toothed tiger just now, its body was at least 3 meters long, or even 4 meters long. It was only slightly smaller than the wild boar, but it was almost as tall as him when it stood on all 4s. Its strength and resilience were even more astonishing. At the very least, it didn't do much when it was hit in the face. It was only after a few consecutive hits on its head that it lost the ability to fight. Ren Bachin reckoned that he wouldn't be able to do anything even if he used his pistol. If it wasn't for Kwon Young-lin's presence, he would have been in trouble. The saber-toothed tiger wasn't a human, it wouldn't stupidly let him stuff a grenade into its mouth. Originally, he thought that a pistol would suffice. But now, he realized that a pistol was only useful against people who were not very strong. Regardless of whether it was the wild boar or the saber-toothed tiger, a pistol would not be of much use. Not only against wild beasts, but even against Kwon Young-lin, it might not be of much use. If Ren Bachin didn't remember wrongly, the strength of a tiger's palm strike was at least 1 ton. Just by looking at the size and strength of this saber-toothed tiger, one could tell that it wasn't any weaker than the tigers on Earth. However, when it hit Kwon Young-lin, it only sent him flying. After rolling on the ground, he was able to stand up and didn't seem to be affected at all. Furthermore, the saber-toothed tiger's claws only left a few shallow wounds on Kwon Young-lin's body. This kind of result also demonstrated Kwon Young-lin's physical defense ability. His body was really too tough. He was afraid that if this pistol hit him, the bullet would at most be stuck in his muscles. Unless it hit a vital point, it wouldn't cause much damage to the opponent. Furthermore, the opponent wasn't a blockhead. His speed was much faster than Ren Bachin's. If Ren Bachin really used a pistol to meet someone like Kwon Young-lin, he would definitely be the one to die. If such a situation really happened, Ren Bachin felt that the situation would be him shooting, the opponent would throw the hammer at him, the opponent would be bitten by a mosquito, and Ren Bachin would die. Everything would be over. It might still be possible to use a rifle as the velocity of the bullet was 2 times higher than a pistol. If it was used against an ordinary person at close range, there wouldn't be much of a difference. However, if it was used against people in this world, there would be a huge difference. If he were to use a rifle, he reckoned that the opponent would be turned into a hornet's nest after a round of bullets. Renbochin sat there and pondered for a while. He turned his head to look at that huge rock and pondered how to climb up. He had seen this rock before, but he felt that it would be very difficult for him to climb up. Therefore, he obediently stayed on the tree. It was easy for Quan Yonglin and Quan Yonghe to climb up, but Renbochin didn't have any skill points for climbing. He circled around the rock twice. This rock was about 3 meters high and there wasn't any place for him to climb. Finally, Renbochin took a few steps back. Then, he sprinted and used his foot to climb up the rock. However, only his palm could reach the top of the rock. It was an inclined surface and he immediately slid down. Renbochin tried a few more times in different directions, but all of them ended in failure. Renbochin had to admit that when he watched videos, it was easy for others to climb. When it was his turn, he realized that it looked easy, but in reality, it was hell. Sigh. Renbochin sighed. He had no choice but to continue walking upstream along the stream. At the same time, he looked around to see if there was a suitable place to hide. Although Quan Yonglin said that there wouldn't be any animals coming, he wouldn't even have a place to hide if an animal came. At this moment, the sun was already setting. There wasn't much time left before the sky turned dark. Renbochin felt that he had to find a place to hide before the sky turned dark. There were many predators in the forest at night. In addition, his line of sight was too short, so it was even more dangerous than during the day. If possible, Renbochin hoped to find a relatively small crevice, the kind where large animals couldn't enter, to hide for the night. In the end, he didn't see the place he was looking for along the way. However, there were a few trees that were suitable for him to hide in. Renbochin walked to the nearest tree and threw more than 10 rocks at it. After confirming that there weren't any snakes, he climbed up the tree himself to take a look. Only then did he feel relieved and returned to the ground. He walked around and saw the bushes moving. Renbochin held his breath. A moment later, a white head popped out. When it saw Renbochin, it immediately bared its teeth. Without any hesitation, Renbochin raised his hand and shot an arrow at the creature's chest. Then, Renbochin immediately ran. It was actually a babe beast again. Why were there so many of them in the forest? Renbochin ran all the way to the side of the stream. Only then did 4 babe beasts chase after him like mad dogs. They ran all the way while drooling. It seemed like they were treating Renbochin as their dinner. Renbochin had the same idea as them. He took out a gun from his back with his right hand and fired more than 10 shots consecutively. In between, he even had the energy to change the magazine. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.